The Lady in the Lake, by Raymond Chandler. The Trelor Building was and is on Olive Street near 6th, on the west side. The Gillerland Company was on the 7th floor, in front, behind swinging double-plate glass doors bound in platinum. Their reception room had Chinese rugs, angular but elaborate furniture, and a tall display in a triangular showcase in the corner. There were perfumes in tall, thin bottles that looked as if a breath would blow them over. At a flat desk in line with the doors was a tall, lean, dark-haired lovely whose name, according to the titled, embossed plaque on her desk, was Miss Adrienne Fromset. She wore a steel-gray business suit and under the jacket a dark blue shirt and a man's tie of lighter shade. The edges of the folded handkerchief in the breast pocket looked sharp enough to slice bread. She had a smooth ivory skin and rather severe eyebrows, and large dark eyes that looked as if they might warm up at the right time, in the right place. I put my plain card, the one without the Tommy gun, in the corner on her desk, and asked to see Mr. Duras Kingsley. She looked at the card and said, "What's the nature of your business, Mr. Marlowe?" "Personal." "I see. Does Mr. Kingsley know you, Mr. Marlowe?" "I don't think so. He may have heard my name. You might say I'm from Lieutenant McGee." "And does Mr. Kingsley know Lieutenant McGee?" "I'm hoping he does," I said. "But maybe the best way to find out is to ask him." "Mr. Kingsley is in conference. I'll send your card in when I have an opportunity." I thanked her and went and sat in a chromium and leather chair that was a lot more comfortable than it looked. The minutes went by on tiptoe with their fingers to their lips. Half an hour and 3 or 4 cigarettes later, a door opened behind Miss Fromset's desk, and 2 men came out backwards, laughing. A third man held the door for them and helped them laugh. They all shook hands heartily, and the 2 men went across the office and out. The third man dropped the grin off his face and looked as if he had never grinned in his life. He was a tall bird in a gray suit, and he didn't want any nonsense. "Any calls?" he asked in a sharp, bossy voice. Miss Fromset said softly, "A Mr. Marlowe to see you, from Lieutenant McGee. His business is personal." "You want to see me?" he barked. I stood up. "If you're Mr. Duras Kingsley." "Who the hell did you think I was?" I let him have that trick and gave him my other card, the one with the business on it. "Who's McGee?" he snapped. "He's just a fellow I know." "I'm fascinated," he said, glancing back at Miss Fromset. She liked it. She liked it very much. "Anything else you would care to let drop about him?" "Well, they call him Violets McGee," I said, "on account if he chews little throat pastilles that smell of violets." "I don't like your manner," Kingsley said in a voice you could have cracked a Brazil nut on. "That's all right," I said. "I'm not selling it. I'll give you exactly 3 minutes. God knows why." He burnt the carpet back past Miss Fromset's desk to his door, yanked it open, and let it swing to in my face. Duras Kingsley marched briskly behind about $800 worth of executive desk and planted his backside in a tall leather chair. "I don't know McGee. I know Sheriff Peterson. I asked for the name of a reliable man to do a job. I suppose you're the man." "McGee is in the Hollywood substation of the sheriff's office," I said. "You can check on that." "Not necessary. I guess you might do, but don't get flipped with me. And remember, when I hire a man, he's my man. He does exactly what I tell him, and he keeps his mouth shut, or he goes out fast." "What do you charge?" $25 a day in expenses, 8 cents a mile for my car." "Absurd," he said. "Far too much. 15 a day flat. I'll pay the mileage within reason, but no joyriding." "Just what do you want done, Mr. Kingsley?" "What do you care? You do all kinds of detective work, don't you?" "Not all kinds, only the fairly honest kinds. For one thing, I don't do divorce business," I said, "and I get 100 down as a retainer, from strangers." "Well, well," he said, in a voice suddenly soft. "And as for being too tough for me," I said, "most of the clients start out either by weeping down my shirt or bawling me out to show who's boss. But usually they end up very reasonable, if they're still alive." "Well, well," he said again, "do you lose very many of them?" "Not if they treat me right," I said. "I want you to find my wife," he said. "Okay," I said, "I'll find your wife." "She's been gone a whole month," he said. "From a cabin we have in the mountains, near Puma Point. Do you know Puma Point?" I said I knew Puma Point. "Our place is 3 miles from the village," he said, "partly over a private road. It's on a private lake, Little Fawn Lake. I own the tract with 2 other men. It's quite large, but undeveloped. My friends have cabins, I have a cabin, and a man named Bill Chess lives with his wife in another cabin, rent-free, and looks after the place. My wife went up the middle of May, came down twice for weekends, was due down the 12th of June for a party, and never showed up. I haven't seen her since." "What have you done about it?" I asked. "Nothing. I haven't even been up there." He waited, wanting me to ask why. I said, "Why?" He pushed his chair back to get a locked drawer open. He took out a folded paper and passed it over. I unfolded it and saw it was a postal telegraph form. The wire had been filed at El Paso on June 14th at 9:19 a.m. It was addressed to Duras Kingsley, 965 Carson Drive, Beverly Hills, and read, "Am crossing to get Mexican divorce. Stop. Will marry Chris. Stop. Good luck and goodbye, Crystal." I put this down on my side of the desk, and he was handing me a large and very clear snapshot which showed a man and a woman sitting on the sand under a beach umbrella. She was a slim blonde, young and shapely and smiling. The man was a hefty, dark, handsome lad with fine shoulders and legs, sleek dark hair and white teeth. 6 feet of a standard type of homewrecker. "That's Crystal," Kingsley said. "And that's Chris Lavery. She can have him, and he can have her, and to hell with them both." "All right, what's the catch?" I asked him. "There's no telephone up there," he said, "and there was nothing important about the affair she was coming down for, so I got the wire before I gave much thought to it. Crystal and I have been washed up for years. She lives her life, and I live mine. She has her own money and plenty of it. She plays around, and I knew Lavery was one of her playmates. I might have been a little surprised that she would actually marry him because the man's nothing but a professional chaser. But the picture looked all right so far, you understand? And then? Nothing for 2 weeks. Then the Prescott Hotel in San Bernardino got in touch with me and said a Packard Clipper registered to Crystal Grace Kingsley at my address was unclaimed in their garage, and what about it? I told them to keep it, and I sent them a check. I figured she was still out of the state, and that if they had gone in a car at all, they'd gone in Lavery's car. The day before yesterday, however, I met Lavery in front of the athletic club down on the corner here. Lavery said he hadn't gone away with her, hadn't seen her in 2 months, hadn't had any communications with her of any kind. I said, "You believed him?" "If I believed him," Kingsley said, "it wasn't because he's a fellow you have to believe. It's because he's a no-good son of a bitch who thinks it's smart to lay his friends' wives and brag about it. He rode a route for us for a while, and he was in trouble all the time. He couldn't keep his hands off the office help. And apart from all that, there was this wire from El Paso, and I told him about it, and why would he think it worthwhile to lie about it?" "She might have tossed him out on his can," I said. "That would have hurt him in his deep place, his Casanova complex." Kingsley shook his head. "I still more than halfway believe him," he said. "You'll have to prove me wrong. But there's another and very worrying angle. I have a good job here, but a job is all it is. I'd be out of here in a hurry if my wife got mixed up with the police." "Police?" "Among her other activities," Kingsley said grimly, "my wife occasionally finds time to lift things in department stores. I think it's just a sort of delusion of grandeur she gets when she has been hitting the bottle too hard, but it happens, and we have had some pretty nasty scenes in managers' offices. So far I've been able to keep them from filing charges, but if something like that happened in a strange city where nobody knew her, well, it might be a prison matter, mightn't it?" "I think we might also throw the shoplifting angle out of this for the time being," I said. "There are too many other things that could have happened. That she did go away with Lavery and they split up. That she went away with some other guy and the wire is a gag. That she met with foul play." "Good God, don't say that," Kingsley exclaimed. "Why not? You've got to consider it. I get a very vague idea of Mrs. Kingsley, that she's young, pretty, reckless, and wild. that she drinks and does dangerous things when she drinks, that she's a sucker for the men, and might take up with a stranger who might turn out to be a crook. Does that fit? Every word of it. How much money would she have with her? She has her own bank and her own bank account. She could have any amount of money. Do you have the management of her affairs? She hasn't any, excepting depositing checks and drawing out money and spending it. And her money certainly never does me any good, if that's what you're thinking. There are more angles to this than I can even see now, I said, but I'll start by talking to Lavery and then taking a run up to Little Fawn Lake and asking questions there. I'll need Lavery's address and a note to your man in charge at the mountain place. He got a letterhead out of his desk and wrote and passed it over. I read, Dear Bill, this will introduce Mr. Philip Marlowe, who wishes to look over the property. Please show him my cabin and assist him in every way. Yours, Darras Kingsley. Now Lavery's address, I said. In Bay City. Miss Fromsett can give it to you, I think. She needn't know why you want it. And you want $100, you said. That's all right, I said. That's just something I said when you were tramping on me. He grinned. We shook hands, and I went back down the long, cool office and out to where Miss Fromsett sat elegantly at her desk. Mr. Kingsley thinks you can give me Chris Lavery's address, I told her, and watched her face. She reached very slowly for a brown leather address book and turned the leaves. Her voice was tight and cold when she spoke. The address we have is 623 Altair Street in Bay City. Telephone Bay City 12523. Mr. Lavery has not been with us for more than a year. He may have moved. I thanked her and went on to the door. From there I glanced back at her. She was sitting very still with her hands clasped on her desk, staring into space. Her eyes were remote and bitter. I got the impression that Mr. Chris Lavery was not a pleasant thought to her. Altair Street lay on the edge of the V, forming the inner end of a deep canyon. It was a short street, not more than 3 or 4 blocks, and ended in a tall iron fence enclosing a large estate. In the short half-block ended by the iron fence were only 2 houses, on opposite sides of the street and almost directly across from each other. The smaller was number 623. I drove past it, turned the car in the paved half-circle at the end of the street, and came back to park in front of the lot next to Lavery's place. The door was narrow, grilled and topped by a lancet arch. Below the grill there was an iron knocker. I hammered on it. Nothing happened. I pushed the bell at the side of the door and heard it ring inside, not very far off, and waited, and nothing happened. A neat black Cadillac coupe came out of the garage across the way, backed, turned, and came along past Lavery's house, and a thin man in dark glasses looked at me sharply, as if I hadn't any business to be there. I did some more hammering on the knocker. This time I got results. The Judas window opened, and I was looking at a handsome, bright-eyed number through the bars of a grill. "You make a hell of a lot of noise," a voice said. "Mr. Lavery?" He said he was Mr. Lavery, and what about it? I poked a card through the grill. "So sorry, not needing any detectives today, please." "I'm working for Darras Kingsley." "The hell with both of you," he said, and banged the Judas window. I leaned on the bell beside the door and got a cigarette out with my free hand, and had just struck a match on the woodwork beside the door when it was yanked open, and a big guy in bathing trunks and a white terry-cloth robe started to come out at me. "Ring that bell again," he said, "and I'll throw you clear across the street." I got the blue and white telegram out of my pocket and held it in front of his bright brown eyes. He read it morosely, chewed his lip, and growled. "Oh, for Christ's sake, come on in then." He held the door wide, and I went past him into a dim, pleasant room. The room went clear to the back of the house, and ended in a flat arch through which showed 3 narrow windows and the top few feet of the white iron railing of the staircase going down. I sat down opposite him and looked him over. He was a nice piece of beef, but to me that was all he was. "Why not tell us where she is?" I said. "We'll find out eventually anyway, and if you can tell us now, we won't be bothering you." "I know what that wire says, but it's the bunk. I didn't go to El Paso with Crystal Kingsley. I haven't seen her in a long time, long before the date of that wire." If you didn't go to El Paso with her, I said, why did she send this telegram? I haven't the faintest idea. You didn't have any idea of marrying her? I thought of it, yes. She has money. Money is always useful. But it would be too tough a way to make it. I nodded, but didn't say anything. So you hire yourself out to dig up dirt. Doing well at it? Nothing to brag about. $1 here, $1 there. And all of them pretty slimy, he said. Look, Mr. Lavery, we don't have to get into a fight. Kingsley thinks you know where his wife is, but won't tell him. He doesn't care a great deal what you and she do together or whether she divorces him or not. He just wants to feel sure that everything is all right and that she isn't in trouble of any kind. Lavery looked interested. Trouble? What kind of trouble? Maybe you won't know the kind of trouble he's thinking of. Tell me, he pleaded sarcastically. I just love to hear about some kind of trouble I didn't know about. This wire has to mean something, I said stubbornly. It's probably just a gag. She's full of little tricks like that, all of them silly and some of them vicious. I don't see any point in this one. I stood her up, he said slowly. It might be her idea of a way to get back at me. I was supposed to run up there one weekend. I didn't go. I was sick of her. I don't like that so well. I'd like it better if you did go to El Paso with her and had a fight and split up. God damn it, I told you I didn't go anywhere with her. Can't you remember that? I'll remember it when I believe it. All right, he said in a clear, tight voice. Out you go. You're wasting my time and your own, if it's worth anything. I stood up and grinned at him. Not a lot, but for what it's worth, I'm being paid for it. It couldn't be, for instance, that you ran into a little unpleasantness in some department store, say at the stocking or jewelry counter. He looked at me very carefully, drawing his eyebrows down at the corners and making his mouth small. I don't get it, he said, but there was thought behind his voice. That's all I wanted to know, I said, and thanks for listening. Yeah, so long, Snooper, and don't bother to come back. Then, without any rhyme or reason that I could see, he spat on the rug in front of his feet. So long, beautiful hunk, I said, and left him standing there. I stood on the sidewalk looking at the house across the way. It was a wide, shallow house with rose stucco walls faded out to a pleasant pastel shade. Set into the gatepost was a bronze tablet which read, Albert S. Almore, M.D. While I was standing there staring across the street, the black Cadillac I had already seen came purring around the corner and went into the empty third of the garage across the way. The thin man in sunglasses went along the sidewalk to the house, carrying a double-handled doctor's bag. Halfway along, he slowed down to stare across at me. I got into the Chrysler and sat there smoking and trying to make up my mind whether it was worthwhile hiring somebody to pull a tail on Lavery. I decided it wasn't, not the way things looked so far. Curtains moved at a lower window, close to the side door Dr. Almore had gone in at. Behind it, Dr. Almore stood staring across my way with a sharp frown on his thin face. I shook cigarette ash out of the window, and he turned abruptly and sat down at a desk. His hand reached for the telephone, touched it, and came away again. I reached down to turn the ignition key. Then Lavery's front door opened, and I took my hand away and leaned back again. He was dressed as I had seen him. I heard the garage door lift up, then the car door open and shut, then the grind and cough of the starting car. Mr. Christopher Lavery was bound for the edge of the broad Pacific, to lie in the sun and let the girls see what they didn't necessarily have to go on missing. I gave my attention back to Dr. Almore. He was on the telephone now, not talking, holding it to his ear, smoking and waiting. Then he leaned forward, as you do when the voice comes back, listened, hung up, and wrote something on a pad in front of him. He leaned back and sat there brooding, staring down at his desk, but not forgetting to look out the window every half-minute. It took about 5 minutes. Then a green sedan whisked around the corner and bore down the block. It coasted to a stop in front of Dr. Almore's house. A big man with dusty blonde hair got out and went up to Dr. Almore's front door. He rang the bell and leaned down to strike a match on the step. The door opened and he went into the house. An invisible hand gathered the curtains at Dr. Almore's study window and blanked the room. More time trickled by. The front door opened again, and the big man loafed casually down the steps and through the gate. He walked diagonally across the street. A large freckled hand appeared on the sill of the car door at my elbow. A large face, deeply lined, hung above it. The man had eyes of metallic blue. "Waiting for somebody?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "Am I? I'll ask the questions." "Well, I'll be damned," I said. "So that's the answer to the pantomime." "What pantomime?" He gave me a hard, level, unfriendly stare from his very blue eyes. I pointed across the street with my cigarette. Nervous Nellie in the telephone, calling the cops after first getting my name from the auto club probably, then looking it up in the city directory. "What goes on?" "Let me see your driver's license." I gave him back his stare. "You fellows ever flash a buzzer? Or is acting tough all the identification you need?" "God damn it," he said, "do you want me to drag you out of there and bounce you on the pavement?" I got my wallet out and handed it to him. He drew the celluloid pocket out and looked at my driver's license, then turned the pocket over and looked at the photostat of my other license on the back. His hand dipped and came up with a blue and gold police badge. "DeGarmo, Detective Lieutenant," he said in his heavy, brutal voice. "Pleased to meet you, Lieutenant." "Skip it. Now tell why you're down here casing Almore's place." "I never heard of Dr. Almore, and I don't know any reason why I should want to case his house." He turned his head to spit. "I was meeting the Spitting Boys today." "Her folks hire you?" he asked suddenly. I shook my head. "The last boy that tried it ended up on the road gang, sweetheart." "Tried what?" "Tried to put the bite on him," he said thinly. "Too bad I don't know how," I said. "He looks like an easy man to bite." "I don't know Dr. Almore, and I'm not interested in him. I'm down here visiting a friend and looking at the view. If I'm doing anything else, it doesn't happen to be any of your business." "Straight goods?" he asked slowly. "Straight goods." "Ah, hell, the guy's screwy," he said suddenly, and looked back over his shoulder at the house. "He ought to see a doctor." He laughed without any amusement in the laugh. "Go on, beat it," he said. He walked heavily across the street and through Dr. Almore's front gate again. Back in Los Angeles, I ate lunch and went up to my office in the Cahuenga building to see what mail there was. I called Kingsley from there. "I saw Lavery," I told him. He told me just enough dirt to sound frank. I still like the idea that they quarreled and split up and that he hopes to fix it up with her yet. "Then he must know where she is," Kingsley said. "He might, but it doesn't follow. By the way, a rather curious thing happened to me on Lavery's street. There are only 2 houses. The other belongs to a Dr. Almore." I told him briefly about the rather curious thing. He was silent for a moment at the end, and then he said, "Is this Dr. Albert Almore?" "Yes. He was Crystal's doctor for a time. He came to the house several times when she was, well, when she had been over drinking. His wife, let me see, there was something about his wife. Oh, yes, she committed suicide." I said, "When?" "I don't remember. Quite a long time ago. I never knew them socially. What are you going to do now?" I told him I was going up to Puma Lake, although it was a little late in the day to start. 30 miles of mountain driving brought me to the tall pines in a place called Bubbling Springs. From there on it was cool all the way. The Puma Lake Dam had an armed sentry at each end and one in the middle. The first one I came to had me close all the windows of the car before crossing the dam. A mile from the village, the highway was joined by another lesser road which curved back into the mountains. A rough wooden sign under the highway sign said Little Fawn Lake, 1 3/4 mile. I took it. Presently another very narrow road debouched from this one, and another rough wooden sign said Little Fawn Lake, private road, no trespassing. Suddenly below me was a small oval lake deep in the trees and rocks and wild grass, like a drop of dew caught in a curled leaf. At the near end of it was a rough concrete dam with a rope handrail across the top and an old mill wheel at the side. Near that stood a small cabin of native pine with a bark on it. Across the lake, the long way by the road and the short way by the top of the dam, a large redwood cabin overhung the water, and farther along, each well separated from the others, were two other cabins. At the far end of the lake from the dam was what looked like a small pier. I got out of the car and started down towards the nearest cabin. Somewhere behind it, an axe thudded. I pounded on the cabin door. The axe stopped. A man's voice yelled from somewhere. Steps came around the corner of the cabin, uneven steps. A man with a harsh face and swarthy skin came into view carrying a double-bitted axe. He was heavily built and not very tall, and he limped as he walked, giving his right leg a little kick out with each step and swinging the foot in a shallow arc. He wore blue denim pants and a blue shirt open on a brown, muscular neck. "Yeah?" "Mr. Bill Chess?" "That's me." I stood up and got Kingsley's note of introduction out of my pocket and handed it to him. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Marlowe. You want to see Kingsley's cabin, huh?" "That's his, the redwood job. Cost about $8,000, and that's money for a mountain cabin." In spite of his weathered appearance, he looked like a drinker. He had the thickened and glossy skin, the two noticeable veins, and bright glitter in his eyes. I said, "Anybody live there now?" "Nope. Mrs. Kingsley was here a few weeks back. She went down the hill. Back any day, I guess. Didn't he say?" I looked surprised. "Why? Does she go with the cabin?" He scowled, and then put his head back and burst out laughing. "Jesus, if that ain't a kick in the pants! Does she go with the—" He put out another bellow, and then his mouth shut tight as a trap. "Yeah, it's a swell cabin," he said, eyeing me carefully. "Think I can't smell a dick when I meet one? I played hit and run with them in every state in the Union. Nuts to you, pal." "What the hell's the matter with you?" "I was out on the roof last night, and I got a hangover like 7 Swedes. I've been up here alone for a month, and it's got me talking to myself. A thing happened to me." "Anything a drink would help?" "You got one?" I pulled a pint of rye out of my pocket. He swung his stiff leg and went into his cabin and came back carrying a couple of small glasses. I tore the metal cap off the bottle and poured him a stiff drink, and a light one for myself. "Man, that's from the right bottle," he said. "I wonder what made me sound off like that. I guess a guy gets the blues up here all alone. No company, no real friends, no wife." He paused and added with a sidewise look, "Especially no wife. She left me a month ago, Friday the 12th of June. I stiffened, but not too much to pour more whiskey into his empty glass. Friday the 12th of June was the day Mrs. Crystal Kingsley was supposed to have come into town for a party. She was one swell kid," he said softly. "It was love at first sight with me and Muriel. I met her in a joint in Riverside 1 year and 3 months ago. We got married. I knew I was well off. But you know how it is with marriage. After a while, a guy like me, he wants to feel a leg. Some other leg. Maybe it's lousy, but that's the way it is." He tossed his second drink off. I passed him the bottle. "Here I am," Bill Chess said, "sitting pretty, no rent to pay. I'm married to as neat a little blonde as you ever clapped an eye on, and all the time I'm nuts and I don't know it. I go for that." He pointed hard at the redwood cabin across the lake. "A showy little tart that means no more to me than a blade of grass," he said. "She's a blonde like Muriel, same size and weight, same type, almost the same color eyes. But, brother, how different from then on in. I'm over there burning trash that morning and minding my own business, and she comes to the back door of the cabin in peekaboo pajamas so thin you can see the pink of her nipples against the cloth. And she says in her lazy, no-good voice, 'Have a drink, Bill. Don't work so hard on such a beautiful morning.' And me, I like a drink too well, and I go to the kitchen door and take it, and then I take another, and then I'm in the house. And the closer I get to her, the more bedroom her eyes are." "So Muriel left you," I said, when he fell silent. "That night. I wasn't even here. I hopped into my Ford and went over to the north side of the lake and holed up with a couple of no-goods like myself and got good and stinking. Along about 4 a.m., I got back home and Muriel's gone, packed up and gone. Nothing left but a note on the bureau and some cold cream on the pillow." He pulled a dog-eared piece of paper out of a shabby old wallet and passed it over. It read, "I'm sorry, Bill, but I'd rather be dead than live with you any longer. Muriel." I handed it back. "What about over there?" I asked, pointing across the lake with a glance. "She packed up and went down the same night. I didn't see her again. I haven't heard a word from Muriel in the whole month, not a single word. So if you want to go across and look at Kingsley's cabin, there isn't a thing to stop you." I followed him up a flight of heavy wooden steps to the porch of the Kingsley cabin. The living room was long and cheerful and had Indian rugs, padded mountain furniture with metal-strapped joints, a plain hardwood floor, and a little built-in bar with round stools in one corner. In the bedroom, one whole side of the room consisted of closets with sliding doors. I slid one open and peeked inside. It seemed to be full of women's clothes of the sort they wear at resorts. Bill Chess was planted squarely in front of me with his chin pushed out and his hard hands in knots on his hips. "So what did you want to look at the lady's clothes for?" he asked in an angry voice. "Reasons," I said. "For instance, Mrs. Kingsley didn't go home when she left here. Her husband hasn't seen her since." I walked around him into the kitchen. Everything was in apple-pie order. I went back to the living room and out on the front porch again and waited for Bill Chess to lock up. We started off side by side. "Would there be any chance your wife and Kingsley's wife went away together?" "I don't get it," he said. "After you went to drown your troubles, they could have had a fight and made up and cried down each other's necks. Then Mrs. Kingsley might have taken your wife down the hill." "Nope. Muriel didn't cry down anybody's neck. They left the weeps out of Muriel, and if she didn't want to cry on a shoulder, she wouldn't have picked little Round Heels. That straight goods little Round Heels lammed off?" "So it seems." "She go with some other guy?" "I should think it likely." "Sure she did. It's a cinch. She had plenty of friends." "Was one of them named Lavery?" "Lavery was up here once." "She isn't with him now?" "He says not." We had come to the end of the lake now. I left him standing there and walked out on a little pier. Bill Chess came up behind me and leaned on the railing at my side. Down below the water there was what looked like an underwater flooring. I couldn't see the sense of that. I asked him. "Used to be a boat landing before the dam was raised. That lifted the water level so far the old landing was 6 feet under." There was a hard movement at my side, and Bill Chess said, "Look there!" in a voice that growled like mountain thunder. Languidly at the edge of this green and sunken shelf of wood, something waved out from the darkness, hesitated, waved back again out of sight under the flooring. The something had looked far too much like a human arm. Bill Chess got a big stone and lifted it breast high. He held it a moment poised, his eyes staring down now, measuring. His body lurched forward hard against the quivering rail, and the heavy stone smashed down into the water. For a moment the water was a confused boiling, then the depths cleared. Something moved in them. It rose slowly with an infinitely careless languor, a long, dark, twisted something that rolled lazily in the water as it rose. I saw wool, sodden and black, a leather jerkin blacker than ink, a pair of slacks. I saw shoes, and something that bulged nastily between the shoes and the cuffs of the slacks. I saw a wave of dark blonde hair straighten out in the water and hold still for a brief instant as if with a calculated effect, and then swirl into a tangle again. The thing rolled over once more, and an arm flapped up barely above the skin of the water, and the arm ended in a bloated hand that was the hand of a freak. Then the face came. A swollen, pulpy gray-white mass without features, without eyes, without mouth. A nightmare with human hair on it. A heavy necklace of green stone showed on what had been a neck, half embedded. Large, rough green stones with something that glittered joining them together. Bill Chess held the handrail, and his knuckles were polished bones. "Muriel," his voice said croakingly. "Sweet Christ, it's Muriel." Behind the window of the board shack, one end of a counter was piled with dusty folders. The glass upper half of the door was lettered in flaked black paint: Chief of Police, Fire Chief, Town Constable, Chamber of Commerce. I went in. A man sat at the desk in a wooden armchair. He had a sweat-stained Stetson on the back of his head, and his large hairless hands were clasped comfortably over his stomach, above the waistband of a pair of khaki pants that had been scrubbed thin years ago. He had large ears and friendly eyes, and his jaws munched slowly, and he looked as dangerous as a squirrel and much less nervous. I liked everything about him. "Are you Sheriff Patton?" "What law we got to have around here, I'm it. Come election, anyways. There's a couple of good boys running against me this time, and I might get whooped." "Nobody's going to whip you," I said. "You're going to get a lot of publicity, that is, if your jurisdiction extends over to Little Fawn Lake. Something bothering you over there, son?" "There's a dead woman in the lake." That shook him to the core. "Anybody I know?" he inquired uneasily. "Muriel Chess, Bill Chess's wife. Looks like suicide." She left a note which sounded as if she was just going away, but it could be a suicide note just as well. She's not nice to look at. Been in the water a long time, about a month, judging by the circumstances. "I see. Who are you, son?" "My name is Marlowe. I'm up from L.A. to look at the property. Look, Sheriff, hadn't we better run over there? The man's half crazy with shock, and he's there all alone." "I'll run down and get Doc Hollis," he said. "You can follow along as I come back by." He stopped in front of a white frame building and presently came out with a man who got into the back seat with the axes and the rope. Beyond the village we went up a dusty hill and stopped at a cabin. A man in faded blue overalls opened the cabin door. "Get in, Andy, business." We drove out to Little Fawn Lake, with me eating enough dust to make a batch of mud pies. The two cars went on to the end of the lake, and all four of us trooped down to the pier from behind Bill Chess's back. The thing that had been a woman lay face down on the boards with a rope under the arms. There was a horrible, sickening smell in the air. The man called Andy got a dusty brown blanket out of the car and threw it over the body. "What you say, Doc?" "About what?" "Cause and time of death." "Don't be a damn fool, Jim Patton. Can't tell nothing, huh?" "By looking at that, good God!" Patton sighed. "Looks drowned, all right," he admitted. Patton went over to the railing and looked down. "Funny place for a body to be," he said. "No current here to mention, but what there is would be towards the dam." "Muriel was a fine swimmer," Bill Chess said quietly. "She dived down in and swum under the boards there and just breathed water in. Had to, no other way." "I wouldn't quite say that, Bill," Patton answered him mildly. "Something was said about a note." Bill Chess rummaged in his wallet and drew the folded piece of ruled paper loose. Patton took it and read it slowly. "Don't seem to have any date," he observed. Bill Chess shook his head somberly. "No. She left a month ago, June 12th. "Left you once before, didn't she?" "Yeah." Bill Chess stared at him fixedly. "Just before the first snow last December. She was gone a week and came back all prettied up." "Note left that time, Bill?" Patton asked smoothly. "No." "This note here looks middling old," Patton said, holding it up. Then Bill Chess said wildly, "Take me in, you sons of bitches! Sure I did it! I'm a heel, always was a heel, always will be a heel, but just the same I loved her! Take me in, damn you!" Nobody said anything at all. The Indian Head Hotel was a brown building on a corner across from the new dance hall. The whole place was full to overflowing with males in leisure jackets and liquor breaths and females in high-pitched laughs. I gobbled what they call the regular dinner, drank a brandy to sit on its chest and hold it down, and went out onto the main street. In my Chrysler, a thin, serious-looking, brown-haired girl in dark slacks was sitting smoking a cigarette. I walked around the car and got into it. "I'm Bertie Keppel," she said cheerfully. "I'm the beautician here daytimes, and evenings I work on the Puma Point Banner. Excuse me sitting in your car." "That's all right," I said. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Marlowe. I was talking to Doc Hollis about poor Muriel Chess. I thought you could give me some details. I understand you found the body." "I came up here with a letter from Darris Kingsley to look at his property. Bill Chess showed me around. Coming back around the end of the lake, we went out on the pier, and Bill spotted an arm waving out from under the planking down in the water. It turned out to belong to what was left of Muriel Chess." "I understand from Doc Hollis she had been in the water a long time." "Yeah. Probably the whole month he thought she'd been gone. There's no reason to think otherwise. The note's a suicide note." "Any doubt about that, Mr. Marlowe?" "I guess the police always have doubts in these cases," I said. "How about you?" "I only met Bill Chess this afternoon. He struck me as a quick-tempered lad, and from his own account he's no saint. But he seems to have been in love with his wife." "What line of business are you in, if I may ask?" "I'd rather not say." "That's almost as good as saying," she said. "Besides, Doc Hollis heard you tell Jim Patton your full name, and we have an L.A. City directory in our office. I haven't mentioned it to anyone." "That's nice of you," I said. "Here's a little item you might like to think about, if you don't know it already. There was a Los Angeles copper named DeSoto up here about 6 weeks ago, a big roughneck with damn poor manners. We didn't like him, and we didn't open up to him much. He had a photograph with him, and he was looking for a woman called Mildred Haviland, he said. He said he had information the woman was staying up here. The photo looked a good deal like Muriel Chess." "What did you tell him?" "We didn't tell him anything. First off, we couldn't be sure. Second, we didn't like his manner. Third, even if we had been sure and I had liked his manner, we likely would not have sicked him on to her. Why would we? Everybody's done something to be sorry for." "Did this man DeSoto see Jim Patton?" "Sure, he must have. Jim didn't mention it." "Did anybody tell Muriel about this guy?" "I did. Wasn't any of my damn business, was it?" "What did she say?" "She didn't say anything, but I did get the impression that there was a queer look in her eyes just for an instant." I said good night, and she walked off into the evening. I went over towards the telephone company's little rustic building. For 90 cents I could talk to Darris Kingsley for 5 minutes. "Find anything up there?" he asked me in a 3-highball voice. I had a long talk with Bill Chess. His wife left him a month ago. They had a fight, and he went out and got drunk, and when he came back, she was gone. She left a note saying she'd rather be dead than live with him anymore. "I guess Bill drinks too much," Kingsley's voice said from very far off. When he got back, both the women had gone. He had no idea where Mrs. Kingsley went. Muriel Chess didn't go away at all. She went down into your private lake. She came back up today. "Good God," Kingsley sounded properly horrified. "You mean she drowned herself?" "Perhaps. The note she left could be a suicide note. It would read as well that way as the other. The body was stuck down under the old submerged landing. Bill got her out. They've arrested him." "Good God," Kingsley said again. "Does it look as if he murdered her?" "Very much. Anyhow, they've taken Bill down to San Bernardino for questioning, and they've taken the body down to be post-mortemed. The main thing for us is that I'll have to testify at an inquest." "That's bad," Kingsley growled. "Very bad. What do you plan to do now?" "On my way home, I'll stop at the Prescott Hotel and see if I can pick up anything there." "Were your wife and Muriel Chess friendly?" "I guess so. I hardly knew Muriel Chess." "Did you ever know anybody named Mildred Haviland?" "What?" I repeated the name. "No," he said. "Is there any reason why I should?" "No. Especially if you hardly knew Muriel Chess. I'll call you in the morning." I climbed back into the car and started back in the direction of Little Fawn Lake. The gate across the private road was padlocked. I put the Chrysler between two pine trees and pussyfooted along the side of the road until the glimmer of the little lake bloomed suddenly at my feet. The front door of the Chess cabin was locked. I went along the walls, feeling window screens. They were all fastened. One window higher up was screenless, a small double cottage window halfway down the north wall. This was locked too. I picked up a large stone and smacked it against the place where the two frames met in the middle. The catch pulled out of dry wood with a tearing noise. I heaved up on the sill and wangled a cramped leg over and edged through the opening. A blazing flash beam hit me square in the eyes. A very calm voice said, "I'd rest right there, son. You must be all tuckered out." The flash pinned me against the wall like a squashed fly. Then a light switch clicked and a table lamp glowed. The flash went out. Jim Patton was sitting in an old brown Mars chair beside the table. "What's on your mind, son, besides breaking and entering?" "I had an idea," I said. "It looked pretty good for a while, but I guess I can learn to forget it." Patton nodded, and his eyes studied me without rancor. "I heard a car coming," he said. "You walk right nice, though. I didn't hear you walk worth a darn." He grinned. "There's a mess of detectives in the L.A. phone book, but only one of them is called Marlowe. I guess you was aiming to search the cabin." "Yeah." "I already pawed around considerable myself. I don't figure I could let you search the place, though. You tellin' who hired you?" "Darris Kingsley, to trace his wife. She skipped out on him a month ago. I thought maybe something up here might give me a lead." "None of what you've been saying don't hardly explain your wanting to search Bill's cabin." "I'm just a great guy to poke around." "Hell," he said, "you can do better than that." "Say I'm interested in Bill Chess, then. But only because he's in trouble and rather a pathetic case, in spite of being a good deal of a heel. If he murdered his wife, there's something here to point that way. If he didn't, there's something to point that way, too." "What kind of a girl was she?" "A mighty cute little blonde when she fixed herself up. Bill says she had a temper, but I never seen any of it." "And did you think she looked like the photo of somebody called Mildred Haviland?" "By gum," he said. "I'll be mighty careful to look under the bed before I crawl in tonight, to make sure you ain't there. Where'd you get that information?" "A nice little girl called Bertie Keppel told me. She happened to mention that an L.A. cop named DeSoto was showing the photo around." "I done wrong there," he said soberly. "I made one of my mistakes. This big bruiser showed his picture to darn near everybody in town before he showed it to me. That made me kind of sore. It looked some like Muriel, but not enough to be sure by any manner of means. You happen to go over to Coon Lake, Mr. Marlowe?" "Never heard of it." "Back about a mile," he said. "There's a big broken-down frame building at that Montclair University used to use for a summer camp maybe 10 years back. Round to the back of it there's a woodshed. I guess you know what I found in that woodshed." "Muriel's car was in that woodshed?" "Yep, and 2 unlocked suitcases in the car, packed with clothes and packed kind of hasty, I thought." He put his hand into the slanting side pocket of his jerkin and brought out a small twist of tissue paper. "Take a look at this." What lay on the tissue was a thin gold chain with a tiny lock, hardly larger than a link of the chain. The gold had been snipped through, leaving the lock intact. There was white powder sticking to both chain and paper. "Where would you guess I found that?" "In a can or box of confectioner's sugar. The chain is an anklet. Some women never take them off, like wedding rings. Whoever took this one off didn't have the key. There wouldn't be any point in Bill cutting it off Muriel's ankle and leaving that green necklace on her neck. There wouldn't be any point in Muriel cutting it off herself. But if Muriel wanted to keep it and yet hide it from Bill, there's some sense in the place where it was hidden. Pretty clever of you to find it, Sheriff." He grinned a little sheepishly. "Hell, I knocked the box over and some of the sugar spilled. If you'll kind of shut that window you bust in, I'll put this lamp out and lock up." I got into the car and drove back down the road looking for a place to hide. 300 yards from the gate, a narrow track curved around a granite boulder and disappeared. I cut the lights and switched off the motor and sat there waiting. Then far off I heard a car motor start up and grow louder, and the white beam of headlights passed below me on the road. I got out of my car and walked back to the chest cabin. A hard push opened the sprung window this time. I poked around in the drawers. I went to the kitchen and prowled the open shelves above and beside the sink. Near the sugar were salt, borax, baking soda, cornstarch, brown sugar, and so on. Something might be hidden in any of them. I shut my eyes and poked a finger out at random, and it came to rest on the baking soda. I got a newspaper from the back of the wood box and spread it out and dumped the soda out of the box. I stirred it around with a spoon. There seemed to be an indecent lot of baking soda, but that was all there was. I lifted down the box of confectioner's sugar. Patton hadn't gone deep enough. Having found one thing by accident, he had assumed that was all there was. Another twist of white tissue showed in the fine white powdered sugar. I shook it clean and unwound it. It contained a tiny gold heart, no larger than a woman's little fingernail. Under brighter light, the tiny engraving on the back of the little gold heart could just be read without a magnifying glass. It was in script. It read, "Al to Mildred, June 28, 1938, with all my love." Al somebody to Mildred Haviland. Mildred Haviland was Muriel Chess. Muriel Chess was dead, 2 weeks after a cop named DeSoto had been looking for her. Patton was in his office telephoning when I got around there. "You didn't go deep enough into the powdered sugar," I said. He looked at the little gold heart, looked at me. "Might have known if you wanted to search that cabin you was going to do it," he said gruffly. I said, "If you were thinking that anklet meant something Bill could have been jealous about, so was I, provided he ever saw it. But strictly on the cuff, I'm willing to bet he never did see it, and that he never heard of Mildred Haviland." "Don't tell me, son. Let me guess all for myself that you got a brand new idea about it." "Yeah. Bill didn't murder his wife. She was murdered by somebody out of her past, somebody who had lost track of her and then found it again and found her married to another man and didn't like it." "Well," he said judiciously, "it does make things kind of complicated, but there ain't anything impossible about it." I said good night and went out, leaving him there moving his mind around with the ponderous energy of a homesteader digging up a stump. The clerk on duty in the Prescott Hotel in San Bernardino was an egg-headed man with no interest in me or anything else. The Hop and I rode a 4x4 elevator to the second floor and walked a couple of blocks around corners. The Hop moved his gum around in his face, put my bag on a chair, and then stood looking at me. I sat on the bed and looked at the Hop. "How long can you stay?" "Doing what?" "Remembering." "I ain't a damn bit of use at it," he said. "I have money to spend," I said in my own peculiar way. I got my wallet unstuck from the lower part of my back and spread tired-looking dollar bills along the bed. "What were you doing on Friday, June 12th?" I asked him. "Late afternoon or evening?" "I was right here, 6 to 12 shift." A woman, slim, pretty blonde, checked in here and stayed until time for the night train to El Paso. She came here driving a Packard Clipper registered to Crystal Grace Kingsley, 965 Carson Drive, Beverly Hills. The car is still in the hotel garage. I separated $1 from my exhibit and it went into his pocket. "She never checked in at the desk, but I remember the Packard. She gave me $1 to put it away for her and to look after her stuff until train time. She ate dinner here." "What was she like to look at?" "She wore a black and white outfit, mostly white, and a Panama hat with a black and white band. She was a neat blonde lady, like you said. Later on she took a hack to the station." I dug in my coat for the snapshot of Crystal and Lavery on the beach and handed it to him. He looked at it steadily and held it away from his eyes, then close. "What's worrying you?" "I'm thinking about the gent in the snap. He enter into it at all?" "Go on with that," I said. "I think this fellow spoke to her in the lobby and had dinner with her. He went back in the hack with her, too. I got the impression the lady didn't quite like him walking up to her so openly in the lobby." I gave him $2 and a 5 to keep them company. He thanked me and left. I decided I would rather drive home than sleep in that hole. I got home about 2:45, and Hollywood was an icebox. It was 9 o'clock when I woke up. I dialed police headquarters downtown and asked for the detective bureau. "DeSoto in?" "Who?" I repeated the name. "What's his rank and department?" Plain clothes something or other. Hold the line." I waited. The burring male voice came back after a while and said, "What's the gag? We don't have a DeSoto on the roster." I hung up and dialed the number of Duras Kingsley's office. "Well," he said, "what did you find out at the hotel?" She was there, all right. And Lavery met her there. He had dinner with her and went with her in a cab to the railroad station. "I ought to have known he was lying," Kingsley said slowly. "What do you plan to do now?" "Go up against Lavery again, of course." He agreed that was the thing to do. I hung up, finished dressing, and went down to the basement for the Chrysler. I started for Bay City again. The morning was full of peace. I left the car and walked along Altair Street to number 623. I saw that the door was not quite shut. I gave the door a little push, and it moved inward with a light click. Nobody answered my ring. I pushed the door a little wider and stepped inside. I stood peering around and listening and hearing nothing except those fixed sounds belonging to the house and having nothing to do with the humans in it. A hand and a glove appeared on the slope of the white metal railing at the edge of the archway where the stairs went down. It moved, and a woman's hat showed, then her head. The woman came quietly up the stairs. She came all the way up, turned through the arch, and still didn't seem to see me. She was a slender woman of uncertain age, with untidy brown hair, a scarlet mess of a mouth, too much rouge on her cheekbones, shadowed eyes. She wore a blue tweed suit that looked like the Dickens, with a purple hat that was doing its best to hang onto the side of her head. She saw me, and didn't stop or change expression in the slightest degree. She came slowly on into the room, holding her right hand away from her body. Her left hand wore the brown glove I had seen on the railing. The right-hand glove that matched it was wrapped around the butt of a small automatic. She stopped then, and her body arched back, and a quick, distressful sound came out of her mouth. Then she giggled, a high, nervous giggle. She pointed the gun at me and came steadily on. I kept on looking at the gun, and not screaming. When she was close enough to be confidential, she pointed the gun at my stomach and said, "All I wanted was my rent. The place seems well taken care of. I just didn't want him to get too far behind in the rent." A fellow with a kind of strained and unhappy voice said politely, "How far behind is he?" "3 months," she said. $240. He promised me a check this morning over the telephone. He promised to give it to me this morning. I shuffled around a bit in an inconspicuous sort of way. The idea was to get close enough to make a side swipe at the gun, knock it outwards, and then jump in fast before she could bring it back in line. I made about 6 inches, but not nearly quite enough for a first down. I said, "And you're the owner?" "Why, certainly. I'm Mrs. Fallbrook. Who did you think I was?" "Well, I thought you might be the owner," I said. "You talking about the rent and all." Another 8 inches. Nice smooth work. It would be a shame to have it wasted. "And who are you, if I may inquire?" "I just came about the car payment," I said. "You mean Mr. Lavery is behind in his car payments?" she asked, looking worried. "A little, not a great deal," I said soothingly. "You know," she said, "it's funny about this gun. I found it on the stairs. Nasty, oily things, aren't they? And the stair carpet is a very nice gray chenille, quite expensive." And she handed me the gun. She went on talking in exactly the same tone of cockeyed reasonableness. My knees cracked, relaxing. "Well, of course it's much easier for you," she said, "about the car, You can just take it away if you have to, but it takes time and money to evict a tenant." I hardly heard what she said. The gun had my interest. I broke the magazine out. It was empty. I turned the gun and looked into the breech. That was empty, too. I sniffed the muzzle. It reeked. I dropped the gun into my pocket. A 6-shot 25 caliber automatic. Shot empty and not too long ago. But not in the last half hour either. "Has it been fired?" Mrs. Fallbrook inquired pleasantly. "Any reason why it should have been fired?" I asked. "Well, it was lying on the stairs," she said. "After all, people do fire them." "How true that is," I said. "But Mr. Lavery probably had a hole in his pocket. He isn't home, is he?" "Oh, no, and I don't think it's very nice of him. He promised me the check, and I walked over." "When was it you phoned him?" I asked. "Why, yesterday evening." She frowned, not liking so many questions. "Look, Mrs. Fallbrook," I said, "let's not kid around any longer, Mrs. Fallbrook. Not that I don't love it. And not that I like to say this, but you didn't shoot him, did you, on account of he owed you 3 months' rent? Why, what a perfectly horrid suggestion, she said angrily. I don't think you're nice at all. Okay, my idea was wrong. Mr. Lavery was out, and you went through the house. Being the owner, you have a key. Is that correct? I didn't mean to be interfering, she said, biting a finger. But I have a right to see how things are kept. And what did you say our name was? Vance, I said. Philo Vance. And what company are you employed with, Mr. Vance? I'm out of work right now, I said, until the police commissioner gets into a jam again. But you said you came about a car payment. Well, that's just part-time work. Then in that case, I think you had better leave now. I said I thought I might take a look around first, if you don't mind. There might be something you missed. I don't think that's necessary, she said. I'll thank you to leave now, Mr. Vance. This gun, you know, is kind of queer. But I told you I found it lying on the stairs, she said angrily. I don't know anything about guns at all. I never shot one in my life. She opened a large blue bag and pulled a handkerchief out of it and sniffled. Well, that's your story, I said. I don't have to get stuck with it. Oh, I shouldn't have come in, she cried. Mr. Lavery will be furious. What you shouldn't have done, I said, was let me find out the gun was empty. Up to then you were holding everything in the deck. She stamped her foot. That was all the scene lacked. That made it perfect. Why, you perfectly loathsome man, she squawked. I won't stay in this house another minute with you. How dare you be so insulting? She caught her voice and snapped it in midair like a rubber band. Then she put her head down and ran for the door. Something, I said out loud, is all wrong with this scene. I shrugged and went quietly down the stairs. The lower hall had a door at each end and 2 in the middle, side by side. One of these was a linen closet and the other was locked. I went along to the end and stepped into a bedroom. Face powder was spilled around on the dressing table. There was a smear of dark lipstick on a towel hanging over the wastebasket. On the bed were pillows side by side with depressions in them that could have been made by heads. A woman's handkerchief peeped from under one pillow. A rather too emphatic trace of cipher hung in the air. The closet was not entirely full of men's clothes. There was also a woman's black and white tailored suit, mostly white. Black and white shoes under it. A Panama with a black and white rolled band on a shelf above it. The door next to the linen closet, the locked one, had to be the bathroom. I shook it, but it went on being locked. I went back to the bedroom and got a flat nail file off the dresser. That worked. A man's sand-colored pajamas were tossed over a painted hamper. There was a safety razor on the edge of the washbowl and a tube of cream with the cap off. 3 empty shells lay bright and coppery on the Nile-green tiles of the bathroom floor, and there was a nice clean hole in the frosted pane of the window. To the left and a little above the window were 2 scarred places in the plaster where the white showed behind the paint, and where something such as a bullet had gone in. I slid the shower curtain aside. He was there, all right. His knees were drawn up but slack. The 2 holes in his naked chest were dark blue, and both of them were close enough to his heart to have killed him. The blood seemed to have been washed away. Nice, efficient work. I went into the bedroom and pulled the handkerchief out from under the pillow. It was a minute piece of linen rag with a scalloped edge embroidered in red. 2 small initials were stitched in the corner in red, A.F. Adrian Fromset, I said. I laughed. It was a rather ghoulish laugh. I folded it up and put it in a pocket. I went back upstairs. I shut the door tight, pulling hard over the sill until the lock clicked. The bellhop at the athletic club was back in 3 minutes with a nod for me to come with him. I went into the club library. Darris Kingsley was in the very last alcove at the far end of the room. "What is it? You made me break an important engagement." "I know," I said, and put my face close to his. She shot him. His eyebrows jumped and his face got that stony look. "Go on," he said in a voice the size of a marble. No answer at Lavery's place. Door slightly open. Pushed it open. In a moment, a slim, dark woman calling herself Mrs. Fallbrook, landlady, came up the stairs with her glove wrapped around a gun. Said she found it on the stairs. Took the gun from her and found it had been fired recently but didn't tell her so. Got rid of her by making her mad. I went downstairs. Signs of a woman having spent the night. Bathroom locked but got it open. Lavery in the shower stall, naked and dead. "My God," Kingsley whispered. "Do you mean to say he had a woman with him last night and she shot him this morning in the bathroom?" "Just what did you think I was trying to say? Does your wife own a gun?" He got the words out in small, gritty pieces. "Yes, she does. A small automatic." "Could you recognize this gun?" I reached in my pocket and put the gun on Kingsley's hand. "I don't know," he said slowly. "It's like it, but I can't tell. We can't let the police have this gun." "But Mrs. Fallbrook knows I have the gun." "We'll have to chance that. Yes, I know you're taking a risk. I intend to make it worth your while. I can't cover up a murder even for a $10 bonus. I was thinking of $500. Just what did you expect me to buy with it?" "Is there anything in Lavery's place apart from the gun that might indicate Crystal has been there lately?" "A black and white dress and a hat like the bellhop in Bernardino described on her." "What kind of perfume does she use?" "Guilloran Regal, the champagne of perfumes," he said woodenly. "What's this stuff of yours like?" "A kind of sheeper, sandalwood sheeper." "The bedroom reeks with it," I said. Kingsley said gravely, "I hired you to protect me from scandal and, of course, to protect my wife if she needed it. It's a question of my wife's neck now. I don't believe she shot Lavery. She may have been there last night. This gun may even be her gun. It doesn't prove she killed him." "They'll have to have the gun. Marlowe may be a very smart guy and very fond of you personally, but he can't risk the suppression of such vital evidence as the gun that killed a man. Whatever I do has to be on the basis that your wife is an obvious suspect, but that the obviousness can be wrong. The story will have to come out. What I was doing down there and why. At worst, they'll find her and prove she killed him. At the best, they'll find her a lot quicker than I can and let me use my energies proving she didn't kill him, which means, in effect, proving that somebody else did. Are you game for that?" "Yes. And the 500 stands for showing Crystal didn't kill him." "I don't expect to earn it," I said. "How well did Miss Fromset know Lavery? Out of office hours? She looked kind of queer when I asked her for his address yesterday morning." She knew him rather well. At one time." "I'll have to talk to her," I said. "Why?" "Never mind why. It's my business to ask all sorts of questions of all sorts of people." "Talk to her, then," he said tightly. "As a matter of fact, she knew the Almores. Could that have any possible connection with this business?" "I don't know." "You're in love with her, aren't you?" "I'd marry her tomorrow if I could," he said stiffly. The Gillerland Company's reception room looked even emptier than the day before. Miss Fromset swayed elegantly out to her desk and sat down and gave me her cool, expectant eyes. "Where do we talk? I have something to show you." "Oh, yes?" She looked me over thoughtfully. A lot of guys had probably tried to show her things, including etchings. At another time, I wouldn't have been above taking a flutter at it myself. "Business," I said. We went into Kingsley's office. As I passed her, I sniffed. Sandalwood. I said, "Guilloran Regal, the champagne of perfumes?" "Yes, that's what it is." Kingsley said you knew the Almores. "I knew Mrs. Almore. That is, I met her a couple of times." "At Lavery's house?" "At Chris Lavery's house, yes. He had cocktail parties." "Then Lavery knew the Almores? Or Mrs. Almore?" "Yes, quite well." "Did Mrs. Kingsley know her, too?" "Yes, better than I did. I only met Mrs. Almore twice. The last time I met her was at Lavery's place, as I said, and there was quite a lot of people there. There was a man there named Brownwell who was very tight. He was ribbing Mrs. Almore about her husband's practice. The idea seemed to be that he was one of those doctors who run around all night with a case of loaded hypodermic needles, keeping the local fast set from having pink elephants for breakfast. Florence Almore said she didn't care how her husband got his money so long as he got plenty of it. A few weeks later, Florence Almore was found dead in the garage late at night. It was Chris Lavery who found her. There was nothing about the affair in the papers except that she had died suddenly. It was well hushed up. I said, was something wrong with it then? People thought so, but they always do. Some time later I met this man Brownwell, and he said, our pal Chris Lavery is sitting pretty. If he ever runs out of girlfriends, he can touch for dough. I said, I don't think I understand. He said, the night the Almore woman died, she was over at Lou Condy's place losing her shirt at roulette. She got into a tantrum. The doc came over. He shot her with one of his busy little needles. Then he went away, leaving Condy to get her home. So Condy took her home, and the doc's office nurse showed up, having been called by the doc. And Condy carried her upstairs, and the nurse put her to bed. So she had to be carried to bed, and yet the same night she got up and walked down to the family garage and finished herself off with monoxide. I know a reporter on the rag they call a newspaper down there. There was no inquest and no autopsy. It's easy to fix a thing like that in a small town if anybody with any pull wants it fixed. And Condy had plenty at that time. He didn't want the publicity of an investigation, and neither did the doctor. Miss Fromm said, stop talking, and waited for me to say something. When I didn't, she went on. I suppose you know what all this meant to Brownwell. Sure. Almore finished her off, and then he and Condy between them bought a fix. But that isn't all the story, is it? No. It seems Mrs. Almore's parents hired a private detective. He was a man who ran a night watchman service down there, and he was actually the second man on the scene that night after Chris. Brownwell said he must have had something in the way of information, but he never got a chance to use it. They arrested him for drunk driving, and he got a jail sentence. I think that's all I can tell you, Mr. Marlowe. It's not quite all. I got the little perfumed rag that had been under Lavery's pillow out of my pocket and leaned over to drop it on the desk in front of her. I found it in Chris Lavery's house under the pillow on his bed. It has initials on it. It has two initials embroidered on it, she said in a cold, angry voice. They happen to be the same letters as my initials. Is that your handkerchief, or isn't it? Yes, it's mine. I must have dropped it there. It's a long time ago. I didn't say anything, and she added, he must have lent it to some woman who would like this kind of perfume. I get a mental picture of the woman, I said, and she doesn't quite go with Lavery. Her upper lip curled a little. It was a long upper lip. I liked long upper lips. I think, she said, you ought to do a little work on your mental picture of Chris Lavery. Any touch of refinement you may have noticed is purely coincidental. That's not a nice thing to say about a dead man, I said. For a moment she just sat there and looked at me as if I hadn't said anything. Then a slow shudder started at her throat and passed over her whole body. He was shot in his shower, I said, and it looks as if it was done by some woman who spent the night there. When was he shot? She asked, and then shuddered slightly again. This morning, I suppose, not long after he got up. That, she said, would probably have been quite late. I've been here since 8:30. I didn't think you shot him. Awfully kind of you, she said, but it is my handkerchief, isn't it? Although not my perfume. But I don't suppose policemen are very sensitive to quality in perfume. No, and that goes for private detectives, too, I said. Are you enjoying this a lot? God, she said, and put the back of her hand hard against her mouth. Does Mr. Kingsley know about this scented rag? Nobody knows about that except you and I, and whoever put it there. Nice of you, she said dryly. I started to go, then I stopped and asked her, Did you hear the name of Mrs. Almore's parents? I could probably find that out for you. I'd be glad to try. That would be very nice of you, I said. I ran a finger along the edge of the desk and looked at her sideways. Pale ivory skin, dark and lovely eyes. Hair as light as hair can be and as dark as night can be. I walked back down the room and out. No police cars stood in front of Lavery's house, and when I pushed the front door open, there was no smell of cigar or cigarette smoke inside. I went to the telephone and dialed. When the male voice said, "Bay City Police, Smoot talking," I said, "There's been a shooting at 623 Altair Street. Man named Lavery lives there. He's dead." "Who are you?" "The name's Marlowe." "You right there in the house?" "Right. Don't touch anything at all." I hung up, sat down on the Davenport, and waited. Not very long. Tires screamed in front of the house. 2 uniformed cops barged into the room. They stood and looked at me warily. Then the older one said briefly, "All right, where is it?" "Downstairs in the bathroom behind the shower curtain. You stay here with him, Eddie." He went rapidly along the room and disappeared. The other one suddenly spotted the gun lying on the telephone table. He charged at it violently like a downfield blocker. "This the death gun?" he almost shouted. "I should imagine so." "Ha!" He leaned over the gun, baring his teeth at me, and put his hand to his holster. "What you shoot him for?" he growled. I've wondered and wondered. "Oh, a Weisenheimer." "Let's just sit down and wait for the homicide boys," I said. The other cop came back up the stairs, looking grave. "You're a man named Marlowe?" I said I was a man named Marlowe. "What's your line, mister? Friend of his?" "Saw him yesterday for the first time. I'm a private operative from L.A." "Oh." The other cop looked at me with deep suspicion. "Cripes, that means everything'll be all balled up," he said. That was the first sensible remark he had made. I grinned at him affectionately. The older cop looked out of the front window again. "That's the Allmore place across the street, Eddie," he said. Eddie went and looked with him. "Sure is," he said. "Say, this guy downstairs might be the guy—" "Shut up," the other one said, and dropped the Venetian blind. A car came down the block and stopped. The older of the prowl car boys opened the door to 2 men in plain clothes, one of whom I already knew. The one who came first was a small man for a cop, middle-aged, with a permanently tired expression. The man behind him was DeGarmo, the big cop with the dusty blonde hair and the savage-lined face who had not liked my being in front of Dr. Allmore's house. "The body's in the basement, Captain Weber. This party's name is Marlowe. He's a private eye from Los Angeles." Weber passed a suspicious eye over my face and nodded briefly. "I'm Captain Weber," he said. "This is Lieutenant DeGarmo. We'll look at the body first." DeGarmo looked at me as if he had never seen me before and followed him. They went downstairs. When they came back, Weber hurried over to the telephone and called the deputy coroner. He put the phone down and barked sharply, "Who handled this gun?" I said I did. "Don't you know enough not to handle a weapon found at the scene of a crime?" "Certainly," I said, "but when I handled it, I didn't know there had been a crime. It was lying on the stairs, and I thought it had been dropped." "Let me see your identification." I handed him my wallet, and he rooted in it. DeGarmo sat in a chair and crossed his legs and stared up blankly at the ceiling. Weber gave me back my wallet. DeGarmo brought his eyes down from the ceiling and spoke in a heavy, bored voice. "Look, Chief, the fellow downstairs is called Lavery. I knew him a little. He was a chaser." I said, "I'm working for a Los Angeles businessman who can't take a lot of loud publicity. A month ago his wife ran off, and later a telegram came which indicated she had gone with Lavery. I came down to see Lavery, and he denied to me that he had gone with her. I got reasonable proof that he had been with her in a San Bernardino hotel the night she was believed to have left the mountain cabin where she had been staying. With that in my pocket, I came down to tackle Lavery again. No answer to the bell. The door was slightly open. I came inside, looked around, found the gun, and searched the house. I found him, just the way he is now." "The name of this man you're working for?" "Kingsley." I gave him the Beverly Hills address. "What else?" "I went up to this mountain cabin where the lady had been staying. It's at a place called Little Fawn Lake near Puma Point. About a month ago, the wife of the caretaker at Kingsley's place up there had a fight with him, and she left as everybody thought. Yesterday she was found drowned in the lake." "Are you implying a connection?" "There's a connection in time. Lavery had been up there. I don't know of any other connection, but I thought I'd better mention it." "This woman was drowned? Suicide?" Suicide or murder, she left a goodbye note. But her husband has been arrested on suspicion. The name is Chess. Bill and Muriel Chess, his wife. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want an honest answer. You've looked through the house, and I imagine pretty thoroughly. Have you seen anything that suggests to you that this Kingsley woman has been here? The answer is yes, I said. There are women's clothes hanging in a closet downstairs that have been described to me as being worn by Mrs. Kingsley at San Bernardino the night she met Lavery there. Anything else? Weber asked quietly. Before I could answer, a car stopped outside the house, and then another. 3 men came in, a short, curly-haired man and large ox-like man, both carrying heavy black leather cases. Behind them, a tall, thin man in a dark gray suit and black tie. Weber pointed a finger at the curly-haired man and said, "Downstairs in the bathroom." "I want a lot of prints from all over the house. We have a corpse for you, Garland," Weber said to the 3rd man. The bright-eyed man nodded briefly, and he and Weber went downstairs after the other 2. DeGarmo stared at me woodenly. I said, "Am I supposed to talk about our conversation yesterday, or is that a private transaction?" "Talk about it all you like," he said. "You talk about it," I said. "I'd like to know more about the Almore case. Both your prowl car boys seemed interested in the fact that Almore's house was across the street from here, and one of them remarked that the case had been killed pretty, or words to that effect." DeGarmo said in a slow, deadly tone, "I'll have the badge off the son of a bitch. All they do is flap their mouths." "Then there's nothing in it," I said. "Nothing in what?" "Nothing in the idea that Almore murdered his wife and had enough pull to get it fixed." DeGarmo walked over to lean down at me. "Say that again," he said softly. I said it again. He hit me across the face with his open hand. It jerked my head around hard. My face felt hot and large. "Say it again," he said softly. I said it again. His hand swept and knocked my head to one side again. He stood leaning down, his lips drawn back over his teeth, a hard animal glare in his very blue eyes. "Any time you talk like that to a cop," he said, "you know what you got coming. Try it on again, and it won't be the flat of a hand I'll use on you. Poke your big nose into our business, and you'll wake up in an alley with the cats looking at you," he said. I didn't say anything. He went and sat down, breathing hard. I held my hand out and worked the fingers slowly to get the hard clench out of them. "I'll remember that," I said. "Both ways." It was early evening when I got back to Hollywood and up to the office. I unlocked the door and picked up an envelope that lay in front of the mail slot and tore it open. It read, "Mr. Marlowe, Florence Almore's parents are a Mr. and Mrs. Eustace Grayson, presently residing at the Rossmore Arms, 640 South Oxford Avenue. Yours, Adrian Fromset." An elegant handwriting, like the elegant hand that wrote it. The Rossmore Arms was a gloomy pile of dark red brick built around a huge forecourt. The Graysons were on the 5th floor in front in the north wing. They were sitting together in a room which seemed to be deliberately 20 years out of date. Grayson's wife was a plump woman who might once have had big baby blue eyes. She sat darning socks with her thick ankles crossed, her feet just reaching the floor, and a big wicker sewing basket in her lap. Grayson was a long, stooped, yellow-faced man with high shoulders, bristly eyebrows, and almost no chin. He was a CPA and looked it every inch. He read my card carefully for the 7th time and looked me up and down and said slowly, "What is it you want to see us about, Mr. Marlowe?" "I'm interested in a man named Lavery. Lavery is the man who found your daughter the night she died." They both pointed like bird dogs when I deliberately hesitated on the last word. "We don't care to talk about that," Grayson said promptly. "I don't blame you. I'd like to get in touch with the man you hired to look into it, though." Grayson asked, "Why?" "I better tell you a little of my story." I told them what I had been hired to do, not mentioning Kingsley by name. I told them the incident with DeGarmo outside Almore's house the day before. Grayson said sharply, "Am I to understand that you were unknown to Dr. Almore, had not approached him in any way, and that he nevertheless called a police officer because you were outside his house?" I said, "That's right." I'd say that was one very nervous man, and DeGarmo asked me if her folks, meaning your daughter's folks, had hired me. So he has the police working for him, Grayson said. Not necessarily. If they made a mistake that time, they wouldn't want it found out now. Mistake! He laughed almost shrilly. Okay, I said, the subject is painful, but a little fresh air won't hurt it. You've always thought he murdered her, haven't you? That's why you hired this Dick, detective. Mrs. Grayson looked up with quick eyes and ducked her head down. I said, was there any evidence, or was it just that you didn't like him? There was evidence, Grayson said bitterly, and with a sudden clearness of voice as if he had decided to talk about it after all. There must have been. We were told there was, but we never got it. The police took care of that. I heard they had this fellow arrested and sent up for drunk driving. You heard right. But he never told you what he had to go on? No. I don't like that, I said. That sounds a little as if this fellow hadn't made up his mind whether to use his information for your benefit or keep it and put a squeeze on the doctor. Grayson looked at his wife. She said quietly, Mr. Talley didn't impress me that way. He was a quiet, unassuming little man, but you can't always judge, I know. How can I find Talley? And what it was that laid the groundwork of suspicion in your minds? It must have been there, or you wouldn't have hired Talley without a better showing from him that he had grounds. Mrs. Grayson said, dope. She means that literally, Grayson said at once, as if the single word had been a green light. Almore was, and no doubt is, a dope doctor. Our daughter made that clear to us. Just what do you mean by a dope doctor, Mr. Grayson? I mean a doctor whose practice is largely with people who are living on the raw edge of nervous collapse from drink and dissipation. People who have to be given sedatives and narcotics all the time. A lucrative practice, he said primly, and I imagine a dangerous one to the doctor. No doubt of that, I said. But there's a lot of money in it. Did you know a man named Condi? No. We know who he was. Florence suspected he was a source of Almore's narcotic supply. I said, could be. Did you know Lavery? We never saw him. We knew who he was. Ever occur to you that Lavery might have been blackmailing Almore? No. Why should it? He was the first to the body, I said. Whatever looked wrong to Talley must have been equally visible to Lavery. It's an idea, Grayson said. What's happened to Talley? Was he framed? I don't think there's any doubt about it. His wife was very bitter. She said he had been given a doped drink in a bar, and he had been drinking with a policeman. She said a police car was waiting across the street for him to start driving and that he was picked up at once. Where's Talley now? Grayson said, we don't know where he is. He got 6 months, but that expired long ago. How about his wife? He looked at his own wife. She said briefly, 1618 and a half Westmore Street, Bay City. Eustace and I sent her a little money. She was left bad off. I made a note of the address and leaned back in my chair and said, somebody shot Lavery this morning in his bathroom. Mrs. Grayson's pudgy hands became still on the edges of the basket. Grayson sat with his mouth open, holding his pipe in front of it. Of course, it would be too much to expect, he said, and let it hang in the air, and then added that Dr. Almore had any connection with that. I'd like to think he had, I said. He certainly lives at a handy distance. The police think my client's wife shot him. But if Almore had anything to do with it, it must surely arise out of your daughter's death. That's why I'm trying to find out something about that. Grayson said, a man who has done one murder wouldn't have more than 25% of the hesitation in doing another. I said, yeah, maybe. What was supposed to be the motive for the first one? Florence was wild, he said sadly. A wild and difficult girl. She was wasteful and extravagant, always picking up new and rather doubtful friends, talking too much and too loudly. A wife like that can be very dangerous to a man like Albert S. Almore. But I don't believe that was the prime motive. We had reason to believe he was carrying on with his office nurse and that Florence had threatened him with a public scandal. I looked at them. A couple of elderly people sitting there quietly, poisoning their minds with hate a year and a half after it had happened. They would like it if Almore had shot Lavery. They would love it. The way I got the story, Dr. Almore's office nurse put Mrs. Almore to bed that night. Would that be the one he was supposed to be playing around with? Mrs. Grayson said sharply, wait a minute. We never saw the girl, but she had a pretty name. Just give me a minute. We gave her a minute. Mildred something, she said, and snapped her teeth. Would it be Mildred Haviland, Mrs. Grayson? She smiled brightly and nodded. Of course, Mildred Haviland. Don't you remember, Eustace? He said, what does it matter? I went back along the silent hallway. The self-operating elevator had an elderly perfume in it, like three widows drinking tea. The house on Westmore Street was a small frame bungalow behind a larger house. I stepped up on the porch and rang the bell. The front door was open behind the screen, but there was no light. From the darkness, a querulous voice said, "What is it?" I spoke into the darkness. "Mr. Talley in?" The voice became flat and without tone. "Who wants him?" "A friend." "Mr. Talley isn't here. He hasn't been here. He won't be here." I put my nose against the screen and tried to peer into the room. I could see the vague outlines of a couch. A woman was lying on it. "I'm sick," the voice said. "I've had enough trouble. Go away and leave me be." I said, "I've just come from talking to the Graysons." There was a little silence, but no movement, then a sigh. "I never heard of them." I said, "Yes, you have, Mrs. Talley. I'm working for them. They're still in there pitching. How about you? Don't you want something back?" The voice said, "I want to be let alone." "I want information," I said. "I'm going to get it." The voice said, "Another copper, huh?" "You know I'm not a copper, Mrs. Talley. The Graysons wouldn't talk to a copper. My name's Marlowe," I said. "I'm a private eye in Los Angeles. I've been talking to the Graysons. I've got something, but I want to talk to your husband." "You've got something," she said. "That sounds familiar. George Talley had something, too, once." I leaned against the doorframe and scratched my chin. Somebody back on the street had clicked a flashlight on. I didn't know why. It went off again. It seemed to be near my car. The pale blur of face on the couch moved and disappeared. The woman had turned her face to the wall. "I'm tired," she said, her voice now muffled by talking at the wall. "Beat it, mister." "Would a little money help any?" "Can't you smell the cigar smoke?" I sniffed. I didn't smell any cigar smoke. I said, "No." "They've been here. They were here 2 hours. God, I'm tired of it all. Go away." "Let me in the house," I said. "We can talk this over. I think I can show you." A tight anger came into her voice. "If you don't get out," she said, "I'm going to start yelling my head off right now. Now!" "Okay," I said quickly. "I'll stick my card in the door so you won't forget my name. You might change your mind." I went down off the porch and back along the narrow walk to the street. I got into the Chrysler and started it up. Westmore was a north and south street on the wrong side of town. I drove north. Headlights glowed in my rearview mirror. I stepped on the gas and reached keys out of my pocket and unlocked the glove compartment. I took a .38 out and laid it on the car seat close to my leg. The car behind me gained. The low whine of a lightly touched siren growled through the night. They were behind me and coming fast. I didn't have any idea of getting away. I wanted to get back where there were houses and people to come out and watch and perhaps to remember. I didn't make it. The police car heaved up alongside again and a hard voice yelled, "Pull over or we'll blast a hole in you." I pulled over to the curb and set the brake. I put the gun back in the glove compartment and snapped it shut. The police car jumped on its springs just in front of my left front fender. A fat man slammed out of it, roaring, "Don't you know a police siren when you hear one? Get out of that car!" I got out of the car and stood beside it in the moonlight. The fat man had a gun in his hand. "Give me your license," he barked in a voice as hard as the blade of a shovel. The other cop in the car slid out from under the wheel and came around beside me and took what I was holding out. He put a flash on it and read. "Name of Marlowe," he said. "Hell, the guy's a Seamus. Just think of that, Cooney." Cooney said, "Is that all? Guess I won't need this." He tucked the gun back in his holster and buttoned the leather flap down over it. "Guess I can handle this with my little flippers," he said. The other one said, "Doing 55. Been drinking, I wouldn't wonder. Could I smell the breath, Seamus?" I let him smell the breath. "Well," he said judiciously, "he ain't staggering. I got to admit that." "Buy the boy a drink, Officer Dobbs." "Now that's a sweet idea," Dobbs said. He went to the car and got a half-pint bottle out of it. "With our compliments, pal." "Suppose I don't want a drink," I said. "Don't say that," Cooney whined. "We might get the idea you wanted feet prints on your stomach." I took the bottle and unscrewed the cap. "You can't work the same gag all the time," I said. Cooney said, "Time is 8:27. Write it down, Officer Dobbs." I tilted the bottle, locked my throat, and filled my mouth with whiskey. Cooney lunged forward and sank a fist in my stomach. I sprayed the whiskey and bent over, choking. I dropped the bottle. I bent to get it and saw Cooney's fat knee rising at my face. I stepped to one side and straightened and slammed him on the nose with everything I had. His left hand went to his face and his voice howled, and his right hand jumped to his gun holster. Dobbs ran at me from one side and his arm swung low. The blackjack hit me behind the left knee. The leg went dead and I sat down hard on the ground, gritting my teeth and spitting whiskey. Cooney took his hand away from his face, full of blood. "Jesus," he cracked in a thick, horrible voice. "This is blood! My blood!" He let out a wild roar and swung his foot at my face. I rolled far enough to catch it on my shoulder. It was bad enough taking it there. Dobbs pushed between us and said, "We got enough, Charlie. Better not get it all gummed up." Cooney turned and moved heavily away to the other side of the police car. Dobbs said to me, "Up on the feet, boyfriend." I got up and rubbed behind my knee. The nerve of the leg was jumping like an angry monkey. "Get in the car," Dobbs said. I went over and climbed into the police car. Dobbs said, "You drive the other heap, Charlie." Dobbs slid into the car beside me. He pressed the starter. "This is going to cost you," he said. "You hadn't ought to have socked him." I said, "Just why not?" "He's a good guy," Dobbs said, "a little loud." "But not funny," I said. "Not at all funny." The cell block was almost brand new. There were 2 bunks on one side of the cell, and a man snored in the top bunk with a dark gray blanket wrapped around him. I sat on the lower bunk. They had tapped me for a gun, but they hadn't stripped my pockets. I got out a cigarette and rubbed the hot swelling behind my knee. It was a very nice jail. Bay City was a very nice place. I knew a girl who lived on 25th Street. It was a nice street. She was a nice girl. She liked Bay City. She wouldn't think about the Mexican and Negro slums stretched out on the dismal flats south of the old interurban tracks, nor of the waterfront dives along the flat shore south of the cliffs, the sweaty little dance halls on the pike, the marijuana joints, the narrow fox faces watching over the tops of newspapers in far too quiet hotel lobbies, nor the pickpockets and grifters and con men and drunk rollers and pimps and queens on the boardwalk. A man in the blue-gray jail uniform came along between the cells, reading numbers. He stopped in front of mine and unlocked the door and gave me the hard stare they think they have to wear on their pans forever and forever and forever. "Out," he said. I stepped out of the cell, and he relocked the door and jerked his thumb, and after a while we went through a steel door that was painted like wood on the outside and battleship gray on the inside. DeGarmo was standing there by the counter, talking to the desk sergeant. He turned his metallic blue eyes on me and said, "Like our jail?" "I like your jail fine." "Captain Weber wants to talk to you." "That's fine," I said. "Don't you know any words but fine?" "Not right now," I said. "Not in here." DeGarmo jerked his head at me and we went out. Captain Weber pushed his sharp bent nose across the desk at me and said, "Sit down." I sat down in a round-backed wooden armchair and eased my left leg away from the sharp edge of the seat. Weber went on. "You asked for trouble, and you got it. You were doing 55 miles an hour in a residential zone, and you attempted to get away from a police car that signaled you to stop with its siren and red spotlight. You were abusive when stopped, and you struck an officer in the face." I said nothing. Weber picked a match off his desk and broke it in half and threw the pieces over his shoulder. "Or are they lying? As usual?" he asked. "I didn't see their report," I said. "I was probably doing 55 in a residential district, or anyhow within city limits. The police car was parked outside of a house I visited. It followed me when I drove away, and I didn't at that time know it was a police car. I went a little fast, but all I was trying to do was get to a better lighted part of town. After you knew it was a police car, you made a half turn in the middle of the block and still tried to get away. Is that right?" I said yes. "These cops that picked me up were parked in front of the house where George Talley's wife lives. George Talley is the man who used to be a private detective down here. DeGarmo knows why I wanted to see him." DeGarmo picked a match out of his pocket and chewed on the soft end of it quietly. He nodded without expression. I said, "You are a stupid man, DeGarmo. Everything you do is stupid and done in a stupid way. When you went up against me yesterday in front of Almore's house, you had to make me curious when I had nothing to be curious about. Weber said, "What the devil has all this got to do with you being arrested in the 1200 block on Westmore Street?" "It has to do with the Almore case," I said. "George Talley worked on the Almore case, until he was pinched for drunk driving. DeGarmo knows about the Almore case and doesn't like it talked about. Cooney and Dobbs had no reason to follow me unless it was because I visited the wife of a man who had worked on the Almore case, and I didn't bust Cooney in the nose until after he forced me to drink whiskey and then hit me in the stomach when I drank it so that I'd spill it down my coat front and smell of it." Weber looked at DeGarmo and said, "If you got made chief of police today, you might let me in on it." DeGarmo said, "Hell, the Seamus just got a couple of playful taps. Kinda kidding." Weber said, "You put Cooney and Dobbs over there?" "Well, yes, I did," DeGarmo said. "I didn't see where we have to put up with these snoopers coming into our town and stirring up a lot of dead leaves just to promote themselves a job and work a couple of old suckers for a big fee." "Is that how it looks to you?" Weber asked. "That's exactly how it looks to me," DeGarmo said. "I wonder what fellows like you need," Weber said. "Right now I think you need a little air. Will you please take it, Lieutenant?" DeGarmo stood up slowly, a dark flush staining his cheekbones. There was a little charged silence. He said, "Okay, Captain. But you're playing this wrong." Weber didn't answer him. DeGarmo walked to the door and out. "Is it your line that you can tie this Almore business to the shooting in Lavery's place? Or is it just a smokescreen you're laying down because you know damn well Kingsley's wife shot Lavery?" I said it was tied to Lavery before he was shot. I told him exactly what I had heard both from Miss Fromstead and from the Graysons. "Then it's your theory that Lavery may have blackmailed Dr. Almore?" he asked at the end. "And that may have something to do with the murder?" "It's not a theory. It's no more than a possibility. It could be coincidence that George Talley was hooked for drunk driving just when he was working on it. It could be coincidence that Almore called a cop because I stared at his house, and that Lavery was shot before I could talk to him a second time. But it's no coincidence that two of your men were watching Talley's home tonight, ready, willing, and able to make trouble for me if I went there." "I grant you that," Weber said, "and I'm not done with that incident. Do you want to file charges?" "Life's too short for me to be filing charges of assault against police officers," I said. He winced a little. "Then we'll wash all that out and charge it to experience," he said. "And as I understand you are not even booked, you're free to go home any time you want to. And if I were you, I'd leave Captain Weber to deal with the Lavery case and with any remote connection it might turn out to have with the Almore case." I said, "And with any remote connection it might have with a woman named Muriel Chess being found drowned in a mountain lake near Puma Point yesterday?" He raised his little eyebrows. "You think that?" "Only you might not know her as Muriel Chess. Supposing that you knew her at all, you might have known her as Mildred Haviland, who used to be Dr. Almore's office nurse, who put Mrs. Almore to bed the night she was found dead in the garage, and who, if there was any hanky-panky about that, might know who it was and be bribed or scared into leaving town shortly thereafter." Weber picked up 2 matches and broke them. He said nothing. "And at that point," I said, "you run into a real basic coincidence, the only one I'm willing to admit in the whole picture. For this Mildred Haviland met a man named Bill Chess in a riverside beer parlor, and for reasons of her own married him and went to live with him at Little Fawn Lake. And Little Fawn Lake was the property of a man whose wife was intimate with Lavery, who had found Mrs. Almore's body. That's what I call a real coincidence." "What did you want to see Talley about when you went to his house tonight?" "He had some line on Florence Almore's death. Her parents hired him to follow it up, but he never told them what it was." "Talley was a petty blackmailer," Weber said contemptuously. "On more than one occasion. Any way to get rid of him was good enough. He had a slipper he had stolen from Florence Almore's foot. It was later found hidden in his house. It was custom-made by a man in Hollywood who makes theatrical footwear and such. Now ask me what was important about this slipper." "What was important about it, Captain?" "She had 2 pair of them exactly alike, made on the same order. It seems that one pair had never been worn." "I think I'm beginning to get it," I said. "The walk from the side door of the house to the garage is rough concrete," I said. "Suppose she didn't walk it but was carried. And suppose whoever carried her put her slippers on and got one that had not been worn. And suppose Tally noticed this while Lavery was telephoning to the doctor who was out on his rounds. So he took the unworn slipper, regarding it as evidence that Florence Almore had been murdered. Weber nodded his head. It was evidence if he left it where it was for the police to find it. After he took it, it was just evidence that he was a rat. When the police came, didn't they notice that a slipper was missing? When the police came, there was no slipper missing. You must remember that Dr. Almore was back at his home in response to Lavery's call, before the police were called. All we knew about the missing shoe is from Tally himself. He might have taken the unworn shoe from the house. We sat there and looked at each other, thinking about it. What reason have you for claiming that the girl drowned up in the mountains was this nurse? 2 reasons, neither one conclusive separately, but pretty powerful taken together. A tough guy who looked and acted like DeGarmo was up there a few weeks ago showing a photograph of Mildred Haviland that looked something like Muriel Chess. He called himself DeSoto and said he was a Los Angeles cop. There isn't any Los Angeles cop named DeSoto. When Muriel Chess heard about it, she looked scared. If it was DeGarmo, that's easily established. The other reason is that a golden anklet with a heart on it was hidden in a box of powdered sugar in the Chess cabin. It was found after her death, after her husband had been arrested. On the back of the heart was engraved, Al to Mildred, June 28, 1938, with all my love. It could have been some other Al and some other Mildred, Weber said. You don't really believe that, Captain. What do you want to make of all this, exactly? I want to make it that Kingsley's wife didn't shoot Lavery, that his death had something to do with the Almore business and with Mildred Haviland, and possibly with Dr. Almore. I want to make it that Kingsley's wife disappeared because something happened that gave her a bad fright, that she may or may not have guilty knowledge, but that she hasn't murdered anybody. There's $500 in it for me if I can determine that. I heard you call DeGarmo Al, but I was thinking of Almore. His name's Albert. But he was never married to the girl, he said quietly. DeGarmo was. I can tell you she led him a pretty dance. A lot of what seems bad in him is the result of it. After a moment I said, I'm beginning to see things I didn't know existed. What kind of a girl was she? Smart, smooth, and no good. She had a way with men. She could make them crawl over her shoes. The big boob would tear your head off right now if you said anything against her. She divorced him, but that didn't end it for him. Does he know she's dead? Not from anything he said. But how could he help it if it's the same girl? He never found her in the mountains, so far as we know. This is all between us, he said. I'd like you to keep it that way. I nodded, but I didn't promise him. The Chrysler was in the police lot at the side of the building with the keys in the ignition. I drove back to Hollywood and went up to my apartment in the Bristol. The green and ivory hallway was empty of all sound except that a telephone bell was ringing in one of the apartments. It rang insistently and got louder as I came near to my door. It was my telephone. I lifted it out of the cradle and answered, and it was Duras Kingsley on the line. Good Lord, where in hell have you been? He snapped. I've been trying to reach you for hours. All right, I'm here now, I said. What is it? I've heard from her. Go ahead, I said. I'm not far away. I'll be over there in 5 or 6 minutes. Be prepared to move. He hung up. The discreet midnight tapping sounded on the door, and I went over and opened it. Kingsley looked as big as a horse in a creamy Shetland sports coat, with a green and yellow scarf around the neck inside the loosely turned-up collar. Miss Fromset was with him. She was wearing slacks and sandals and a dark green coat and no hat, and her hair had a wicked luster. I said, What did you hear, and where is she? Kingsley sat down and flexed the fingers of his right hand and put it inside his coat. It came out with an envelope, a long one. You have to take this to her, he said. $500. She has to get out of town. I said, out of what town? Bay City somewhere. She'll meet you at a place called the Peacock Lounge on Arguello Boulevard at 8th Street or near it. Kingsley tossed the envelope across and it fell on the chess table. I looked inside. It was money, all right. That much of his story made sense. I said, What's the matter with her drawing her own money? She's in trouble. I don't know how she knows she's in trouble unless a pickup order has been broadcast. Has it? I said I didn't know. Kingsley said, "Well, she won't risk cashing a check now." "All right, we can't make sense where there isn't any," I said. "Did you talk to her?" "No, Miss Fromstead talked to her. She called the office. It was just after hours, but that cop from the beach, Captain Weber, was with me. Miss Fromstead naturally didn't want her to talk at all then. She told her to call back. I didn't want to talk to her. She didn't want to talk to me. I guess there's no doubt she shot Lavery. Weber seemed quite sure of it." "That doesn't mean anything," I said. "What he says and what he thinks don't even have to be on the same map." So she called back later, and what then? Miss Fromstead said, "I took the call in Mr. Kingsley's office. She said to send the money down to the Peacock place and ask who would bring it. She will go into this Peacock lounge every hour about 15 minutes past the hour. I guess I assumed you would be the one to go. I described you to her, and you're to wear Derry's scarf. I described that." "You've got a hell of a crust, assuming I'll go down there and take a getaway steak to somebody I know the police are looking for." "I admit it's a bit thick," he said. "It makes accessories after the fact out of all three of us." That might not be too tough for her husband and his confidential secretary to talk out of, but what they would do to me would be nobody's dream of a vacation. "I'm going to make it worth your while," he said. "And we wouldn't be accessories if she hasn't done anything." "I'm willing to suppose it," I said. "Otherwise I wouldn't be talking to you." I reached for the envelope and put it in my pocket. If I start right away, I might make the 1:15 deadline. "She's dyed her hair dark brown," Miss Fromstead said. "That ought to help a little." I said, "It doesn't help me to think she's just an innocent wayfarer." Kingsley stood up and got the scarf off his neck and handed it to me. "We'll go to my place and wait for a call from you." Miss Fromstead stood up and yawned. "No, I'm tired, Derry. I'm going home and going to bed." "Where do you live, Miss Fromstead?" I asked. "Bryson Tower on Sunset Place, apartment 716. "Why?" "I might want to reach you sometime." Kingsley gave a queer look, and they went out. I went out myself and took the stairs down to the basement garage and got the Chrysler awake again. The Peacock Lounge had a glass brick front, and soft light glowed out around the stained glass peacock that was set into the brick. I went in around a Chinese screen and looked along the bar, and then sat at the outer edge of a small booth. I saw nobody that looked like my idea of Crystal Kingsley. A tiny white-faced Mexican boy with enormous black eyes came in with morning papers and scuttled along the booths trying to make a few sales before the barman threw him out. I bought a paper and looked through it to see if there was any interesting murders. There were not. I folded it and looked up as a slim, brown-haired girl in coal-black slacks and a yellow shirt and a long gray coat came out of somewhere and passed the booth without looking at me. I tried to make up my mind whether her face was familiar or just such a standard type of lean, rather hard prettiness that I must have seen it 10,000 times. She went out of the street door around the screen. 2 minutes later, the little Mexican boy came back in, shot a quick look at the barman, and scuttled over to stand in front of me. "Mister," he said, his great big eyes shining with mischief. Then he made a beckoning sign and scuttled out again. I went after him. The girl in the gray coat and yellow shirt was standing in front of the gift shop, looking in at the window. "Give me the money, please." I said, "I'd have to know who you are." "You know who I am," she said softly. "Where can we talk?" "We don't have to talk. Just give me the money and go the other way." "I'm doing this at quite a risk. I'm at least going to have the satisfaction of knowing what goes on where I stand." "Very well, if it has to be that way. I'm at the Granada, 2 blocks north on 8th, apartment 618. Give me 10 minutes. I went and sat in the Chrysler and gave her 10 minutes before I started it. The Granada was an ugly gray building on a corner. I drove around the corner and left the car in the garage. I came to the door of apartment 618 and stood outside it a moment and then kicked softly. She stood back from the door and I went past her into a square room with twin-wall beds and a minimum of uninteresting furniture. A small lamp on a window table made a dim yellowish light. She closed the door and went to sit in a gloomy Boston rocker across the room. I sat down on a thick davenport. "What is it you have to know?" "Kingsley hired me to find you. I've been working on it. I supposed you would know that." "Yes, his office sweetie told me that over the phone. She told me about the scarf." I took the scarf off my neck and folded it up and slipped it into a pocket. I said, "I know a little about your movements." I know you left your car at the Prescott Hotel in San Bernardino and that you met Lavery there. I know you sent a wire from El Paso. What did you do then? Well, we went to El Paso, she said in a tired voice. I thought of marrying him then, so I sent that wire. You saw the wire? Yes. Well, I changed my mind. I asked him to go home and leave me. He made a scene. Did he go home and leave you? Yes. I went to Santa Barbara and stayed there a few days, then to Pasadena, then to Hollywood. What was the idea of going to these places and not sending any word? Didn't you know he would be anxious? Oh, you mean my husband, she said coolly. I don't think I worried much about him. As for the idea of it all, well, I just had to be somewhere quite alone and try to straighten myself out. How are you getting on with it? Not very well, but I'm not going back to Durras Kingsley. Won't you please give me the money and go away? Sure, right away. But wasn't there any other reason for your going away from Little Fawn Lake just then? Anything connected with Muriel Chess, for instance? She looked surprised. But anyone can look surprised. Good heavens, what would there be? That frozen-faced little drip. What is she to me? I thought you might have had a fight with her. About Bill. Bill? Bill Chess? She seemed even more surprised, almost too surprised. Bill claims you made a pass at him. Good heavens, that muddy-faced boozer? He might be a muddy-faced boozer, I said. The police think he's a murderer, too, of his wife. She's been found drowned in the lake. She moistened her lips and held her head on one side, staring at me fixedly. I'm not too surprised, she said slowly. They fought terribly at times. Do you think that had something to do with my leaving? I nodded. There was a chance of it. It didn't have anything to do with it at all, she said seriously, and shook her head back and forth. I don't suppose you knew she had once worked in Dr. Almar's office. She looked completely puzzled now. I was never in Dr. Almar's office, she said slowly. What are you talking about? Muriel Chess was really a girl called Mildred Haviland, who had been Dr. Almar's office nurse. That's a queer coincidence, she said wonderingly. I said, you see why I had to talk to you. Muriel being found drowned and you having gone away, and Muriel being Mildred Haviland, who was connected with Dr. Almar at one time, as Lavery was also in a different way. I don't think Chris had anything to do with Dr. Almar, she said. He knew Dr. Almar's wife. I don't think he knew the doctor at all. Well, I guess there's nothing in all this to help me, I said. I guess I can give you the money now. I got the envelope out and stood up to drop it on her knee. She let it lie there. I sat down again. You do this character very well, I said. This confused innocence with an undertone of hardness and bitterness. People have made a bad mistake about you. They've been thinking of you as a reckless little idiot with no brains and no control. They have been very wrong. She stared at me, lifting her eyebrows. Then a small smile lifted the corners of her mouth. You did the Fallbrook character very well, too, I said. Looking back on it, I think it was a shade overdone. But at the time, it had me going all right. And when you put the gun in my hand like that, I fell like a brick. But why did you go back at all? Why take such a risk in broad daylight in the middle of the morning? So you think I shot Chris Lavery, she said quietly. I don't think it. I know it. Why did I go back? Is that what you want to know? He had all my money. He had stripped my purse. It was really safer to go back. To take in the milk and newspaper, for instance. People lose their heads in these situations. I didn't see why I should. It's so very much safer not to. I see, I said. Then, of course, you shot him the night before. I ought to have thought of that. He had been shaving, but guys with dark beards and lady friends sometimes shave the last thing at night, don't they? It's been heard of, she said almost gaily. And just what are you going to do about it? Turn you over to the police, naturally. It will be a pleasure. I don't think so. She threw the words out almost with a lilt. You wondered why I gave you the empty gun. Why not? I had another one in my bag, like this. Her right hand came up from her coat pocket and she pointed it at me. I grinned. It may not have been the heartiest grin in the world, but it was a grin. I've never liked this scene, I said. Detective confronts murderer. Murderer produces gun, points same at detective. Murderer tells detective the whole sad story with the idea of shooting him at the end of it, thus wasting a lot of valuable time, even if in the end murderer did shoot detective. Only murderer never does. Something always happens to prevent it. But this time, she said softly, and got up and moved towards me softly across the carpet. Suppose we make it a little different. Suppose I don't tell you anything and nothing happens and I do shoot you. I still wouldn't like the scene, I said. You don't seem to be afraid, she said, and slowly licked her lips, coming towards me very gently without any sound of footfalls on the carpet. I'm not afraid, I lied. It's too late at night, too still, and the window is open and the gun would make too much noise. And you're not good with guns. You missed Lavery 3 times. Stand up, she said. I stood up. I'm going to be too close to miss, she said. She pushed the gun against my chest, like this. I really can't miss now, can I? Now be very still. Hold your hands up by your shoulders and then don't move at all. I put my hands up beside my shoulders. I looked down at the gun. My tongue felt a little thick, but I could still wave it. You'll have to turn around now, she said, polite as a tailor at a fitting. You're definitely not good with guns. You're much too close to me, and I hate to bring this up, but there's that old business of the safety catch not being off. You've overlooked that, too. She started to do 2 things at once. To take a long step backwards and to feel with her thumb for the safety catch without taking her eyes off my face. 2 very simple things needing only a second to do, but she didn't like my telling her. The minute confusion of it jarred her. She let out a small choked sound, and I dropped my right hand and yanked her face hard against my chest. My left hand smashed down on her right wrist, the heel of my hand against the base of her thumb. The gun jerked out of her hand to the floor. There were vague sounds of our scuffling on the floor by the Davenport and hard breathing, and if a floorboard creaked, I didn't hear it. A figure loomed up suddenly on my left, just behind and out of range of clear vision. I knew there was a man there and that he was a big man. The scene exploded into fire and darkness. I didn't even remember being slugged. I smelled of gin. My coat was off and I was lying flat on my back beside the Davenport on somebody's carpet. I reached up wearily and felt the back of my head. A shoot of pain from the touch went clear to the soles of my feet. I groaned and made a grunt out of the groan from professional pride, what was left of it. I rolled over slowly and carefully and looked at the foot of a pulled-down wall bed. When I rolled, a square gin bottle rolled off my chest and hit the floor. I moved my head around on my neck. It hurt. I moved it around some more, and it still hurt, so I climbed up on my feet and discovered I didn't have any shoes on. The shoes were lying against the baseboard, looking as dissipated as shoes ever looked. I put them on wearily. There was a lamp on the table by the open window. There was the doorway with the green curtains across it. Never sit with your back to a green curtain. It always turns out badly. Something always happens. Who would I said that to? A girl with a gun. She was lying on the pulled-down twin bed. She was wearing a pair of tan stockings and nothing else. Her hair was tumbled. There were dark bruises on her throat. Her mouth was open, and a swollen tongue filled it to overflowing. Across her naked belly 4 angry scratches leered crimson red against the whiteness of flesh. Deep, angry scratches gouged out by 4 bitter fingernails. On the Davenport there were tumbled clothes, mostly hers. My coat was there also. I disentangled it and put it on. Something crackled under my hand in the tumbled clothes. I drew out a long envelope with money still in it. I put it in my pocket. Marlowe, $500. I hoped it was all there. There didn't seem much else to hope for. Heavy feet came along the hallway, and there was a hard mutter of voices. A hard fist knocked against the door. The knob was tried, but nobody walked in. The knocking began again, stopped. The steps went away. I went to the green curtain and brushed it aside and looked down a short, dark hallway into a bathroom. I went in there and put the light on. I stood on the edge of the tub and eased the window up. This was the 6th floor. There was no screen. I looked sideways and saw that the bathroom window of the next apartment was not more than 3 feet away. Behind me, a rather remote and muffled voice seemed to be chanting the policeman's litany, "Open it up or we'll kick it in." I grabbed a towel off the rack and pulled the 2 halves of the window down and eased out on the sill. I swung half of me over to the next sill, holding onto the frame of the open window. I could just reach to push the next window down if it was unlocked. It wasn't unlocked. I got my foot over there and kicked the glass over the catch. I wrapped the towel around my left hand and reached in to turn the catch. I pushed the broken window down and climbed across. I climbed down and groped through darkness to a door and opened it and listened. Filtered moonlight coming through north window showed a bedroom with twin beds made up and empty. I put light on the bedroom and poked into closets. One of them had a man's clothes. The tailor's label inside the coat pocket declared the owner's name to be H.G. Talbot. I went to the bureau and poked around and found a soft blue shirt that looked a little small for me. I carried it into the bathroom and stripped mine off and washed my face and chest and wiped my hair off with a wet towel and put the blue shirt on. I used plenty of Mr. Talbot's rather insistent hair tonic on my hair and used his brush and comb to tidy it up. The top button of the shirt wouldn't meet its buttonhole, so I poked into the bureau again and found a dark blue crepe tie and strung it around my neck. I got my coat back on. I lit one of Mr. Talbot's cigarettes and hoped that Mr. and Mrs. Talbot, wherever they were having a much better time than I was. I went to the living room door, the one giving on the hallway, and opened it, and leaned in the opening, smoking. A man coughed a little way down the hall, and I poked my head out farther, and he was looking at me. He came towards me briskly, a small, sharp man in a neatly pressed police uniform. I yawned and said languidly, "What goes on, officer? Little trouble next door to you. Hear anything?" "I thought I heard knocking. I just got home a little while ago." "What was the name?" "Talbot." "Just a minute, Mr. Talbot. Wait there just a minute." He went along the hallway and leaned into an open doorway through which light streamed out. "Oh, Lieutenant," he said, "the man next door is on deck." A tall man came out of the doorway and stood looking along the hall straight at me. DeGarmo. That made it perfect. DeGarmo looked straight at me, but nothing in his acid blue eyes showed that he had ever seen me before. He came quietly along the hall and put a hard hand against my chest and pushed me back into the room. When he had me a half-dozen feet from the door, he said over his shoulder, "Come in here and shut the door, Shorty." The small cop came in and shut the door. "Quite a gag," DeGarmo said lazily. "Put a gun on him, Shorty." "Oh, boy," he said softly, whistling a little. "How do you know, Lieutenant?" "Know what?" DeGarmo asked, keeping his eyes fixed on mine. "What were you thinking of doing, pal? Going down to get a paper? To find out if she was dead?" "Oh, boy," Shorty said, "a sex killer. Frisk him, Shorty." Shorty ran around me, feeling here and there for a gun. "Nothing on him," he said. "Let's get him out the back way," DeGarmo said. "It's our pinch if we make it before Weber gets here." "You ain't even detailed on the case," Shorty said, doubtfully. "Didn't I hear you was suspended or something?" "What can I lose," DeGarmo asked, "if I'm suspended? We'll take him down ourselves, just the two of us." "Yeah, sure." DeGarmo opened the fire door beyond the elevator shaft, and we went down the steps and came out into the shadowy basement. DeGarmo climbed under the wheel of the Chrysler. I got in beside him, and Shorty got into the back seat. DeGarmo drove the car hard for 10 blocks and then slowed a little. Shorty said uneasily, "I guess you know what you're doing, Lieutenant, but this ain't the way to the hall." "That's right," DeGarmo said. He let the car slow down to a crawl and then turned into a residential street. He stopped about the middle of the block. He turned his head to look back at Shorty. "You think this guy killed her, Shorty?" "I'm listening," Shorty said in a tight voice. "All right, then," DeGarmo said. "If you had murdered the girl, how would you get out of there?" "I'd walk out," Shorty said. "Why not?" "Hey," he barked at me suddenly, "why didn't you?" I didn't answer him. DeGarmo said tonelessly, "You wouldn't climb out of a bathroom window 6 floors up and then burst in another bathroom window into a strange apartment where people would likely be sleeping, would you?" "I don't guess I would," Shorty said cautiously. DeGarmo turned his big head and stared at me. "What were you doing there?" "I can't remember," I said. "We'll take you up back in the hills a few miles where you can be quiet and look up at the stars and remember. You'll remember all right." Shorty said, "That ain't no way to talk, Lieutenant. Why don't we just go back to the hall and play this the way it says in the rule book?" "To hell with the rule book," DeGarmo said. "I want to go back to the hall." "Nobody's stopping you, kid. You want to walk?" Shorty was silent for a moment. "That's right," he said at last quietly. "I want to walk." He slammed the car door shut. DeGarmo let the clutch in and gunned the motor and hit 40 in the first block and a half. He slowed down at the boulevard and turned east and began to cruise along at a legal speed. "Let's hear you talk," he said quietly. "Maybe we can work this out." I began to talk. Kingsley came over to my apartment tonight and said he had heard from his wife over the phone. She wanted some money quick. I was to take it to her and get her out of whatever trouble she was in. I was to be at the Peacock Lounge at 15 minutes past the hour. I went down there. She wanted the money and no conversation. I wanted her story. Finally, she saw she would have to talk a little and told me she was at the Granada. Anyway, I went and we talked. Nothing she said made very much sense until we talked about Lavery getting shot. Then she made too much sense too quick. I told her I was going to turn her over to the police, so she pulled a gun. I think she meant to use it, but she got too close to me and I got a headlock on her. While we were wrestling around, somebody came out from behind a green curtain and slugged me. When I came out of that, the murder was done. DeGarmo said slowly, "You get any idea of a look at who slugged you?" "No. I felt or half saw he was a man and a big one. And this lying on the Davenport mixed in clothes." I reached Kingsley's yellow and green scarf out of my pocket and draped it over his knee. "I saw Kingsley wearing this earlier this evening," I said. DeGarmo said, "What's your idea of the motivation here?" "Why did Kingsley kill her? If he did? That's not hard. She'd been cheating on him, making him a lot of trouble, endangering his job, and now she had killed a man. Also, she had money, and Kingsley wanted to marry another woman. Also, he saw a chance to make me the goat. It wouldn't stick, but it would make confusion and delay." DeGarmo said, "Where does Kingsley live? One thing I know is how to make people talk." 965 Carson Drive, Beverly Hills. He handed me the green and yellow scarf. "Tuck that back into your pocket until we want to spring it on him." It was a 2-storied white house with a dark roof. DeGarmo got out of the car. He leaned his thumb on the bell and juggled the cigarette out of his pocket with one hand and put it between his lips. After a while there was a light on the fan over the door. Slowly and as if unwillingly the door was opened. He was gone 4 or 5 minutes. Then he came out and stood beside the car smoking. "One small car in the garage," he said. "The cook says it's hers. No sign of Kingsley. They say they haven't seen him since this morning. Where would he be?" "We'll have to try his girlfriend first. Her name is Fromstead, and she lives at the Bryson Tower on Sunset Place." 25 minutes brought us to the Bryson Tower. DeGarmo lunged past the desk towards an open elevator. The clerk snapped at DeGarmo's back like a terrier. "One moment, please. Whom did you wish to see?" "Look, buddy," he said to the clerk. "We want up to 716. He took his shield out of his pocket and held it so that the light glinted on the gold and blue enamel. I'm a police lieutenant." The clerk shrugged. "Very well. I hope there isn't going to be any trouble. I better announce you then. What names?" "Lieutenant DeGarmo and Mr. Marlowe." He went behind a glass screen, and we heard him talking on the phone after a longish pause. He came back and nodded. "Miss Fromstead is in. She will receive you." "That's certainly a load off my mind," DeGarmo said. The 7th floor was cool and quiet. We came to a door with 716 on it in gilt numbers in a circle of gilt leaves. There was an ivory button beside the door. DeGarmo pushed it, and chimes rang inside the door, and it was opened. Miss Fromstead wore a quilted blue robe over her pajamas. We went past her into a rather narrow room with several handsome oval mirrors and gray-period furniture. She sat down on a slender love seat and leaned back and waited calmly for somebody to say something. I said, "This is Lieutenant DeGarmo of the Bay City Police. We're looking for Kingsley. We thought you might be able to give us an idea where to find him." "Is it that urgent?" "Yes, something has happened." DeGarmo said bluntly, "We just want to know where Kingsley is, sister. We don't have time to build up a scene." The girl looked at him with a complete absence of expression. She looked back at me and said, "I think you had better tell me, Mr. Marlowe." "I went down there with the money," I said. "I went to her apartment to talk to her. While there, I was slugged by a man who was hidden behind a curtain. I didn't see the man. When I came out of it, she had been murdered." "Murdered?" I said murdered. She closed her fine eyes, and the corners of her lovely mouth drew in. "I suppose I ought to scream or something," she said. "I don't seem to have any feeling about it at all." DeGarmo said, "We don't feel so interested in your feelings right now. What we want to know is where Kingsley is." She said to me quietly, "The lieutenant here is a Bay City officer?" I nodded. She turned at him slowly with a lovely, contemptuous dignity. "In that case," she said, "he has no more right in my apartment than any other loud-mouthed bum that might try to toss his weight around." DeGarmo looked at her bleakly. He waved his hand at me. "Okay, you work on her. I can get all the cooperation I need from the L.A. boys, but by the time I had things explained to them, it would be a week from next Tuesday." I said, Miss Fromm said, if you know where he is, please tell us. You can understand that he has to be found. You ask a great deal of confidence, Mr. Marlowe, considering that you haven't been such a very smart detective after all. I ask for it, I said, and I expect to get it. And how smart I've been is something you don't really know anything about. Do you want to know where we went after we left your apartment and whether he brought me home, things like that? Yes. He didn't bring me home. I took a taxi on Hollywood Boulevard not more than 5 minutes after we left your place. I didn't see him again. I supposed he went home. The reason I'm telling you this is because I know it doesn't matter in the least. If I thought it did, I wouldn't tell you. We want to know where he is now. I can't tell you because you have no idea. I said, suppose he had something on his mind, something that was eating pretty deep into him. Suppose he knew more about all this than we realized, or than I realized, and knew things were coming to a head. He would want to go somewhere quietly and try to figure out what to do. Don't you think he might? After a moment, the girl said tonelessly, he wouldn't run away or hide because it wasn't anything he could run away or hide from. But he might want a time to himself to think. In a strange place, in a hotel, I said, or in a much quieter place than that. I looked around for the telephone. It's in my bedroom, Miss Fromm said, knowing at once what I was looking for. The phone was on a night table by the bed. I sat down on the edge of the bed and dialed long distance. When the operator answered, I asked for Constable Jim Patton at Puma Point, person to person, very urgent. I put the phone back in the cradle and lit a cigarette. DeGarmo glowered down at me, tough and tireless and ready to be nasty. What now? He grunted. Wait and see. Who's running this show? Your asking me shows that. I am, unless you want the Los Angeles police to run it. The phone rang in a moment. This is Patton at Puma Point. This is Marlowe in Los Angeles, I said. Remember me? Sure, I remember you, son. I ain't half awake, though. Do me a favor, I said, although I don't know why you should. Go or send over to Little Fawn Lake and see if Kingsley is there. Don't let him see you. You can spot his car outside the cabin or maybe see lights. And see that he stays put. Call me back as soon as you know. I'm coming up. I'll have a Bay City police officer with me who wants to question him about a murder. Not your murder, another one. You ain't just being tricky, are you, son? No, call me back at Tunbridge 2722. We went back into the living room. We had some coffee and sat around looking like people seeing friends off at the railroad station. The call from Patton came through in about 25 minutes. There was a light in the Kingsley cabin, and a car was parked beside it. We ate some breakfast at Alhambra, and I had the tank filled. We drove out Highway 70 and started moving past the trucks into the rolling ranch country. DeGarmo sat moodily in the corner, his hands deep in his pockets. After a while, he said, "That was my girl that drowned in the lake up there. I haven't been right in the head since I heard about it. If I could get my hands on that guy Chess." "You made enough trouble," I said, "letting her get away with murdering Almore's wife." I stared straight ahead through the windshield. I knew his head moved and his eyes froze on me. After a long time, his words came. They came through tight teeth and edgeways, and they scraped a little as they came out. "You a little crazy or something?" "No," I said, "neither are you. You know that Florence Almore didn't get up out of bed and walk down to that garage. You know she was carried. You know that was why Tally stole her slipper, the slipper that had never walked on a concrete path. You know that Almore didn't murder his wife with morphine, and that if he wanted to murder her, morphine would be the last thing in the world he would use. But you know that somebody else did, and that Almore carried her down to the garage and put her there, technically still alive to breathe in some monoxide, but medically just as dead as though she had stopped breathing." DeGarmo said softly, "Brother, how did you ever manage to live so long?" I said, "By not falling for too many gags and not getting too much afraid of professional hard guys. Only a heel would have done what Almore did, only a heel and a badly scared man who had things on his soul that wouldn't stand daylight. But as a practical matter of who killed her, you know the girl killed her. The girl, Mildred Haviland, was playing house with Almore, and his wife knew it. She had threatened him. She knew all about morphine and where to get all of it she needed and how much to use. She was alone in the house with Florence Almore after she put her to bed. She was in a perfect spot to load a needle with 4 or 5 grains and shoot it into an unconscious woman through the same puncture Almore had already made. She would die perhaps while Almore was still out of the house, and he would come home and find her dead. The problem would be his.
Nobody would believe anybody else had doped his wife to death, but you know. You were in love with her still. You scared her out of town, out of danger, but you covered up for her. You let the murder ride. Why did you go up to the mountains looking for her? And how did I know where to look, he said harshly. It wouldn't bother you to add an explanation of that, would it? Not at all, I said. She got sick of Bill Chess and his boozing, but she had to have money to make a break. She thought she had something on Almore that was safe to use, so she wrote him for money. He sent you up to talk to her. She didn't tell Almore what her present name was or any details or where or how she was living. A letter addressed to Mildred Haviland at Puma Point would reach her. All she had to do was ask for it. But no letter came, and nobody connected her with Mildred Haviland. All you had was an old photo and your usual bad manners, and they didn't get you anywhere with those people. Okay, he said at last, let's forget it. If I'm in a jam, that's my business. That's all right, I said. I'm not planning to put the bite on anybody myself. I'm telling you this mostly so you won't try to hang any murders on Kingsley that don't belong on him. I thought maybe it was because you hated my guts, he said. I'm all done with hating you, I said. It's all washed out of me. I hate people hard, but I don't hate them very long. We didn't talk any more now. We had no more to talk about. We came at last to the dam at the end of Puma Lake. I stopped the car and the sentry threw his piece across his body and stepped up to the window. Close all the windows of your car before proceeding across the dam, please. I reached back to wind up the rear window on my side. DeGarmo held his shield up. Forget it, buddy. I'm a police officer, he said with his usual tact. The sentry gave him a solid, expressionless stare. Close all windows, please, he said in the same tone he had used before. Nuts to you, soldier boy, DeGarmo said. It's an order, the sentry said. Suppose I told you to go jump in the lake, DeGarmo sneered. The sentry said, I might do it. I scare easily. He patted the breech of his rifle with a leathery hand. DeGarmo turned and closed the windows on his side. We drove across the dam. I turned off on the road to Little Fawn Lake and wound around the huge rocks and past the little gurgling waterfall. Patton's car was standing in the road pointing towards the lake. Close to it and pointed the other way was a small battered coupe. I stopped my car behind Patton's and locked it and got out. Andy got out of the coupe and stood staring at us woodenly. I said, This is Lieutenant DeGarmo of the Bay City Police. Andy said, Jim's just over the ridge. He's waiting for you. We walked up the road as Andy got back into his coupe. Kingsley's cabin across the water seemed to be without life. We went on, and Patton stood up from behind a rock. Nice to see you again, he said, not looking at me but at DeGarmo. He put his hand out and shook DeGarmo's hard paw. Last time I seen you, Lieutenant, you was wearing another name. Kind of undercover, I guess you'd call it. I guess I didn't treat you right neither. I apologize. DeGarmo nodded and said nothing. Suppose we sit down here and you tell me what it is we're supposed to be doing now. DeGarmo said, Kingsley's wife was murdered in Bay City last night. I have to talk to him about it. You mean you suspect him? Patton asked. And how? DeGarmo grunted. You got a gun, Lieutenant? DeGarmo patted under his left arm. Patton looked at me. I shook my head. No gun. Kingsley might have one too, Patton said. I don't hanker after no fast shooting around here, Lieutenant. You look to me like a fellow who would jack his gun out kind of fast. I've got plenty of swift, if that's what you mean, DeGarmo said, but I want this guy talking. We went along the shore of the lake and came to Kingsley's cabin. Patton opened the door and we walked into the room. Darris Kingsley lay back in a deep chair by the cold fireplace with his eyes closed. There was an empty glass and an almost empty whiskey bottle on the table beside him. Patton moved to within a few feet of him and stood looking silently down at him for a long moment before he spoke. Mr. Kingsley, he said then in a calm, steady voice, we got to talk to you a little. Kingsley moved with a kind of jerk and opened his eyes and moved them without moving his head. He sat up slowly in the chair and rubbed his hands up and down the sides of his face. I was asleep, he said. Fell asleep a couple of hours ago. I was as drunk as a skunk, I guess. Patton said, This is Lieutenant DeGarmo of the Bay City Police. He has to talk to you. DeGarmo stood glowering down at Kingsley. Your wife is dead, Kingsley, he said brutally, if it's any news to you. Kingsley stared at him and moistened his lips. Takes it easy, don't he, DeGarmo said. Show him the scarf. I took the green and yellow scarf out and dangled it. DeGarmo jerked a thumb. Yours? Kingsley nodded. Careless of you to leave it behind you, DeGarmo said. Kingsley said very quietly, "Leave it behind me where?" "In the Granada Apartments on 8th Street in Bay City, apartment 716. Kingsley now very slowly lifted his eyes to meet mine. "Is that where she was?" he breathed. I nodded. She didn't want me to go there. I wouldn't give her the money until she talked to me. She admitted she killed Lavery. She pulled a gun and planned to give me the same treatment. Somebody came from behind the curtain and knocked me out without letting me see him. When I came to, she was dead. When I had done talking, he made a vague gesture towards the scarf. "What has that got to do with it?" "The lieutenant regards it as evidence that you were the party hidden out in the apartment." Kingsley thought that over. He didn't seem to get the implications of it very quickly. "I suppose you know what you're talking about," he said. "I'm sure I don't." DeGarmo said, "All right, play dumb. See what it gets you. You could begin by accounting for your time last night after you dropped your biddy at her apartment house." Kingsley said evenly, "If you mean Miss Fromset, I didn't. She went home in a taxi. I was going home myself, but I didn't. I came up here instead. I thought the trip in the night air might help me to get straightened out." "Straightened out from what, if I might ask?" "Straightened out from all the worry I had been having." "Hell," DeGarmo said, "a little thing like strangling your wife and clawing her belly wouldn't worry you that much, would it?" "Son, you hadn't ought to say things like that," Patton put in. "You ain't produced anything yet that sounds like evidence." DeGarmo swung away from him disgustedly. He jabbed his finger at Kingsley. "I suppose you didn't go down to Bay City at all," he said harshly. "No, why should I? Marlowe was taking care of that. And I don't see why you're making a point of the scarf. Marlowe was wearing it." DeGarmo stood rooted and savage. He turned very slowly and gave me his bleak, angry stare. I said all I told about the scarf was that it was in the apartment and that I had seen Kingsley wearing it earlier this evening. That seemed to be all you wanted. I might have added that I had later worn the scarf myself so the girl I was to meet could identify me that much easier. DeGarmo backed away from Kingsley and leaned against the wall at the end of the fireplace. His right hand hung lax at his side, the fingers slightly curved. I said, "I told you all I had ever seen of Mrs. Kingsley was a snapshot. One of us had to be sure of being able to identify the other. The scarf seemed obvious enough for identification. As a matter of fact, I had seen her once before, although I didn't know it when I went to meet her." I turned to Kingsley. "Mrs. Fallbrook." "I thought you said Mrs. Fallbrook was the owner of the house," he answered slowly. "That's what she said at the time. That's what I believed at the time. Why shouldn't I?" DeGarmo made a sound in his throat. His eyes were a little crazy. I told him about Mrs. Fallbrook and her fluttery manner and the empty gun she had been holding. "I didn't hear you tell Weber any of that." I didn't want to admit that I had gone to talk it over with Kingsley before I reported it to the police. "That's something we're going to love you for," DeGarmo said with a cold grin. "How much you paying the Seamus to cover up your murders for you, Kingsley?" "His usual rates," Kingsley told him emptily. "And a $500 bonus if he can prove my wife didn't murder Lavery." "Too bad he can't earn that," DeGarmo sneered. "Don't be silly," I said. "I've already earned it." There was a silence in the room, one of those charged silences which seem about to split apart with a peal of thunder. It didn't. "Nobody could possibly know that better than you know it, DeGarmo," I said. After what seemed a very long time, DeGarmo said quietly, "I don't see why. I don't know anything about Kingsley's wife. To the best of my knowledge, I never laid eyes on her until last night." He lowered his eyelids a little and watched me broodingly. He knew perfectly well what I was going to say. I said it anyway. "And you never saw her last night, because she had been drowned in Little Fawn Lake, because the woman you saw dead in the Granada Apartments was Mildred Haviland, and Mildred Haviland was Muriel Chess. And since Mrs. Kingsley was dead long before Lavery was shot, it follows that Mrs. Kingsley did not shoot him." Kingsley clenched his fists on the arms of his chair, but he made no sound at all. There was another heavy silence. Patton broke it by saying in his careful, slow voice, "That's kind of a wild statement, ain't it? Don't you kind of think Bill Chess would know his own wife?" I said, "After a month in the water, with his wife's clothes on her and some of his wife's trinkets? She left a note that might be a suicide note. Her clothes and car had gone away. During the month she was gone, he had heard nothing from her. And then this corpse comes up out of the water with Muriel's clothes on it. Of course there would be differences, and if any substitution had been suspected, they would have been found and checked. But there was no reason to suspect any such thing. Crystal Kingsley was still alive. She had gone off with Lavery. She had left her car in San Bernardino. She had sent a wire to her husband from El Paso. She was all taken care of so far as Bill Chess was concerned. Patton said, "I ought to have thought of it myself. But if I had, it would look too kind of far-fetched." "Superficially, yes," I said, "but only superficially. If it hadn't been for Lavery, we might not be here talking about it now. Lavery is the key to the whole thing. He was in the Prescott Hotel in San Bernardino the night Crystal Kingsley was supposed to have left here. He saw a woman there who had Crystal Kingsley's car, who was wearing Crystal Kingsley's clothes, and of course he knew who she was. But he didn't have to know there was anything wrong. All he had to know was that he met Muriel Chess. Muriel took care of the rest." I went on talking. "If Muriel Chess impersonated Crystal Kingsley, she murdered her. That's elementary. She had been Dr. Almar's office nurse and his little pal, and she had murdered Dr. Almar's wife in such a neat way that Almar had to cover up for her. And she had been married to a man in the Bay City Police who also was sucker enough to cover up for her. She got the men that way. She could make them jump through hoops. Very well, she killed people who got in her way, and Kingsley's wife got in her way. Crystal Kingsley could make the men do a little jumping through hoops, too. She made Bill Chess jump, and Bill Chess's wife wasn't the girl to take that and smile. Also, she was sick to death of her life up here. She must have been, and she wanted to get away. But she needed money. Mildred didn't positively have to have Crystal Kingsley's car and clothes and credentials and whatnot, but they helped. What money she had must have helped a great deal. All this made killing her a rational as well as an agreeable thing to do. That disposes of motive, and we come to means and opportunity. The opportunity was made to order for her. She had quarreled with Bill, and he had gone off to get drunk. She had to pack her own clothes and take them in her car to Coon Lake and hide them there because they had to be gone. She had to murder Crystal Kingsley and dress her in Muriel's clothes and get her down to the lake. As to the murder itself, I imagine she got her drunk or knocked her on the head and drowned her in the bathtub in this cabin. She was a nurse. She knew how to handle things like bodies, and a drowned body will sink. All she had to do was guide it down into the deep water where she wanted it. She did it. She dressed in Crystal Kingsley's clothes, packed what else of her she wanted, got into Crystal Kingsley's car, and departed. And at San Bernardino she ran into her first snag, Lavery. Lavery knew her as Muriel Chess. She put her hooks into Lavery at once. She took him to El Paso and there sent a wire he knew nothing about. Finally, she played him back to Bay City. He wanted to go home, and she couldn't let him get too far from her. Lavery alone could destroy all the indications that Crystal Kingsley had actually left Fawn Lake. When the search for Crystal Kingsley eventually began, it had to come to Lavery, and at that moment Lavery's life wasn't worth a plugged nickel. So the search began, and immediately Lavery was shot dead in his bathroom the very night after I went down to talk to him. That's all there is to it. Patton said, "Who killed her, son? I gather you don't like Kingsley for that little job." I said, "Somebody who thought she needed killing. Somebody who had loved her and hated her. Somebody who was too much of a cop to let her get away with any more murders, but not enough of a cop to pull her in and let the whole story come out. Somebody like DeGarmo." DeGarmo straightened away from the wall and smiled bleakly. His right hand made a hard, clean movement, and he was holding a gun. He spoke to me without looking at me. "I don't think you have a gun," he said. "Patton has a gun, but I don't think he can get it out fast enough to do him any good. Maybe you have a little evidence to go with that last guess. But wouldn't that be important enough for you to bother with?" "A little evidence," I said, "but it'll grow." Somebody stood behind that green curtain in the Granada for more than half an hour and stood as silently as only a cop on a stakeout knows how to stand. Somebody who had a blackjack. Somebody who had stripped the girl and raked her body with scratches in the kind of sadistic hate a man like you might feel for a woman who had made a small private hell for him. Somebody who has blood and cuticle under his fingernails right now, plenty enough for a chemist to work on. I bet you won't let Patton look at the fingernails in your right hand, DeGarmo." DeGarmo lifted the gun a little and smiled. "And just how did I know where to find her?" he asked. "Almar saw her, coming out of or going into Lavery's house. That's what made him so nervous. That's why he called you when he saw me hanging around. As to how exactly you trailed her to the apartment, I don't know. You could have hid out in Almore's house and followed her, or followed Lavery." DeGarmo nodded and stood silent for a moment. "I want to get out of here," he said at last. "Not very far, maybe, but no hick cop is going to put the arm on me." Patton said quietly, "Can't be done, son. You know I got to take you in." "Let him go," I said. "He can't get out of these mountains. That's why I brought him up here." Patton said soberly, "Somebody might get hurt taking him. If it's anybody, it's got to be me." DeGarmo grinned. "You're a nice boy, Patton. Look, I'll put the gun back under my arm and we'll start from scratch. I'm good enough for that, too." He tucked the gun under his arm. "I'm sitting down," Patton complained. "I ain't as fast as you anyways. I just don't like to look yellow." DeGarmo put his head back a little and laughed. While he was still laughing, his right hand jumped for his gun again. I didn't see Patton move at all. The room throbbed with the roar of his frontier cult. DeGarmo's arm shot straight out to one side, and the heavy Smith & Wesson was torn out of his hand and thudded against the knotty pine wall behind him. He shook his numbed right hand and looked down at it with wonder in his eyes. Patton stood up slowly. He walked slowly across the room and kicked the revolver under a chair. DeGarmo was sucking a little blood off his knuckles. "You give me a break," Patton said sadly. "You hadn't ought ever to give a man like me a break." DeGarmo nodded to him and straightened his back and started for the door. "Don't do that," Patton told him calmly. DeGarmo kept on going. He reached the door and pushed the screen. "I'm going out of here," he said. "There's only one way you can stop me. So long, fatty." Patton didn't move a muscle. DeGarmo went out through the door. I went to the front window and looked out. DeGarmo came down off the steps and started across the top of the little dam. "He's crossing the dam," I said. "Has Andy got a gun?" "I don't figure he'd use one if he had," Patton said calmly. "You don't know any reason why he should." "Well, I'll be damned," I said. Patton sighed. "He hadn't ought to have given me a break like that," he said. "Had me cold. I got to give it back to him. Won't do him a lot of good." "He's a killer," I said. "He ain't that kind of killer," Patton said. "Andy's coming down to the other end of the dam," I said. "DeGarmo has stopped him. He's speaking to him." "He'll take Andy's car, maybe," Patton said sadly. "Well, I'll be damned," I said again. I looked back at Kingsley. He had his head in his hands and he was staring at the floor. I turned back to the window. DeGarmo was out of sight beyond the rise. Andy was halfway across the dam, coming slowly, looking back over his shoulder now and then. The sound of a starting car came distantly. Andy looked up at the cabin, then turned back and started to run along the dam. Patton said, "Well, I guess we better go back to the office and do some telephoning." Kingsley got up suddenly and walked heavily out of the room. I heard the bed springs creak. Patton and I went quietly out of the cabin. Patton had just finished putting his calls through to block the highways when a call came through from the sergeant in charge of the guard detail at Puma Lake Dam. We went out and got into Patton's car, and Andy drove very fast along the lake shore back to the big dam at the end. We were waved across the dam where the sergeant was waiting in a jeep beside the headquarters hut. The sergeant waved his arm and started the jeep, and we followed him a couple of 100 feet along the highway to where a few soldiers stood on the edge of the canyon looking down. The sergeant got out of the jeep, and Patton and Andy and I climbed out of the official car and went over by the sergeant. "Guy didn't stop for the sentry," the sergeant said, and there was bitterness in his voice. "Damn near knocked him off the road. The sentry in the middle of the bridge had to jump fast to get missed. The one at this end had enough. He called the guy to halt. Guy kept going. Orders are to shoot in a case like that," he said. "The sentry shot." He pointed down to the grooves in the shoulder at the edge of the drop. "This is where he went off." 100 feet down in the canyon, a small coop was smashed against the side of a huge granite boulder. There were 3 men down there. They had moved the car enough to lift something out. Something that had been a man.